Ba-da-da-dee-dee-dee. Right then, hello everyone. Let's see if this is all working for me. Oh, good lord, there's so many buttons having to play. Oh, that's all sorted itself out. That's all done. Oh, goody. Oh, let's put it in the wrong place. Quickly save that and save that. Hello everyone, how are we doing? Right then. So, today is Jutland. We have a competent, well, with a competent battlecruiser fleet commander, but apparently not a competent person at controlling OBS, considering I keep selecting the wrong thing. Oh, hey, good lord. I don't know. So. Done. It's done. Right then. Hopefully that's all done. Hello everyone. Right then. Hello Knight 68 Front. Hello 7 Crude. Hello John Shea. Hello Michael Cooch. Hello EA History. I'm not going to use the phrase blame Beatty or frigating Beatty if I can avoid it. Carl Gasberg, I probably will use the. I won't probably use the phrase. Yay! We're rid of Beatty. A couple of points, but leave that one side. Hello, Stephen Cronin. Frank Bell. Mahan. Oh shoot, he died in 1914. Mahan would have been an interesting choice of commander. Hello, Rudon. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Stephen Richards. Hello, Tanaveka. Hello, Byron Newman. Hello, Calvin Gasberg. Hello, 702. Spindrift. Hello. Hello, Paul Amos. Hello, Jacob. Hello, DG40. Hello, Matcha Dostal. Hello, Carl McGasberg. Hello, David Goulding. Hello, Brock. Hello, everyone who's on. Hello, Just Funk. Hello, Steve Clarke. So, hello. Is my mum okay? Yes, she's okay, but... Okay, so, as you know, my office is in the garden. And before I tend to go live, I always check in on her, you know, before I go live. So I just phoned her up and went, "Hi, Mum." Right. "Hiya, just checking on her before I go live." Right. Because I did a video call, she was in the dark. I went, "Why are you in the dark?" "Well, my legs are hurting, so I don't feel like getting up and closing the curtains and putting lights on." "Okay, Mum, coming." So I went up, closed curtains, put lights on, sorted everything out for her. But yes, at some point, me and the NHS have... I love the NHS, I support the NHS, I do want to start one, but I am going to be having strong words with several members of the NHS probably tomorrow about exactly when my mum's double hip operation is going to be, because she needs it. Do you think a different commander of the Battlecruiser will be more sturdy and good enough? I do love that for Paul from Chicago. Well, the trouble is, good enough is just a Commodore in charge of 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron, which is attached to the Battlecruiser force, and he is really, really good. But yeah, we are going to go with Sturdee, and I will explain why we're going with Sturdee, okay? We'll start off now, but I want to start sort of talking this through. Now, so I don't believe you can avoid it. John UK, hello. Hello, John UK, how you on? And hello, Manic Chief. Hello. There's new people here. That's cool. Right. Please, do you mind if I take a second to get some iron brew? Right. Where is the iron brew? Do you know what happened this week that was really scary? Is I ran out of iron brew. I've been recording all sorts of videos recently. All sorts of random videos. Because I'm not just recording November videos, I'm recording some of the December videos and other videos. And it's fun. Including one of the most watched videos of all time is roughly 3 hours long. So, for me to do a reaction video to the entire 3-hour length, you can imagine how long that video is going to be. I have a feeling when I upload it to YouTube, YouTube is going to tell me that I am putting up full-length documentaries. Or I'm going to have to break it up into multiple parts. I'm not sure what I'm going to do on that one. Now, first things first, as outlined for today. As I do with all the historical, when we do alternate history analysis, it's going to keep as close to the history as possible, because that's what we try and do. So I'm not going to suddenly bring in magical powers, and I'm going to try and have to rationalize and explain everything I go through and do. I'd also say this. I had to come up with logical reasons for everything to happen, and then I had to keep the internal logic consistent. It's fun doing that when you're dealing with characters like you had in this time period. They are interesting individuals. You also have to realize there are more options than just Sturdee to pick from. Okay? There are more options than just Sturdee to pick from. So, whilst I will explain why Sturdee is the best choice and is the one I would have gone through, which is why I accepted the question as it was put, which was Sturdee, there are other officers to go through, and I will explain why those other officers wouldn't have been picked. Now, most important point, therefore, in all of that, is we've got to work things through. And that means this is going to have more consequences than just Jutland, and I'll work through some of those. It's been interesting because I have to admit, in the long patrol, I haven't gone into probably as much detail as I will do in a live about what I think happens after Jutland. Put it up now. Because the question which I'm going to be putting in the long patrol is about what you think would have happened after Jutland. What you think would have happened with the likely consequence of Sturdee ending up as the Battlecruiser fleet commander in this period. Next position to consider, and next point to consider, is that I have to admit, in this simulation, I had to think through how the Germans might respond. Bear with me. The Germans, in many ways, focus their tactics for certain operations on the type of commander they profiled Beatty to be. Okay? Some of their traps, some of their analysis is based on him as an officer. This means you have to think about timing, because if you change commander too early, then Jutland will be different, because they would have profiled Sturdee as different to Beatty. Okay, these things do not take place in a vacuum. Hello, Leslie. Nice everyone, you're saying you bet the Admiral class will get built no matter what. True, but the Admiral class that gets built after a successful operation at Jutland with a different command style could be very different than the Admiral class which are actually historically built. Because remember, one is a product of the perceptions prior to Jutland, and then the rest of them are changed after the experience of Jutland. Well, if the Battlecruisers had been used as they were supposed to be at Jutland, and therefore things had gone, they were, will there be as many changes? It's not sneaky of the Germans. It's and the reason I'm picking up is I know it's a joke from you, but there are people who will literally think they shouldn't be doing this. No, it's good command. You adapt your command structure. It's one of the problems you have at the moment for various command structures in this world. Even you know, to this day, sometimes some of the problems you have in World War II and even more recent commands is how do you focus? Do you know who the command structure is that you're against? One of the interesting examples given is in the Falklands War. Brigadier Julian Thompson is given an entire profile of the general who is supposed to be in charge of the Argentinian forces. When he meets the general in charge of the Argentinian forces, he does not match the profile at all. Why? Because they got the wrong general. They have the same surname, they have the same name, but they're different people. And the thing is, the profile of that general had fed in to some of the decisions Julian Thompson had made in the ground force campaign. That some decisions which the other officers in the ground campaign and in the sea campaign had made. Because they were looking at the general and they were, trying to make assessments of what that officer would think they were doing. So this is a factor you have to consider. You change the commander of the Battlecruiser fleet at the wrong time, you change history a long way away from where it was. Nicely, please go slowly. Just had a nightmare drive from Leeds to home. 1.5 hours for a 40-minute journey. Oh, good lord. We so need a decent railway system in the UK. We so need a decent railway system. Hi, Paul. Zinrich, what's his flagship? His flagship will still be Lion. His flagship will still be Lion. Because that makes sense, and he is used to commanding fleets from Battlecruisers. Mark Harness, but there was a reason Jellicoe kept Sturdee under close watch. There are reasons Jellicoe keeps Sturdee under close watch, but there's also reasons Jellicoe trusts Sturdee. It's a 2 1 or 4 of the other. So, shameless book plug. It's always nice to have a shameless book plug. As you all know, the paperback version comes out soon. This is still the hardback of first edition. And yeah. Honestly, the more and more stuff I do these days, especially on here, the more and more stuff I do in the other areas I work in, the more and more I'm thankful of all the support I get through this channel. And the more and more it makes things viable. I've got a whole list of things I'd like to do with this channel. There's a whole list of videos and history I'd like to do, and things I can do which I can do through this medium far better than I can do from any other. But I will also add, next October, going to be confirming date hopefully soon. This is October 2024. I have been offered the opportunity to kick off the Maritime and Naval History public lectures at King's College London for the academic year 24-25. So I will be speaking probably on the subject of preparing for World War II and the designs and the selections of sloops and escorts and things in that period. I might well bring in some stuff to do with the books, which I hope to be published certainly by then, the Flower Class, etc. I do realise there are people who will probably be joining me on tonight's live on Discord chat after tonight's live, who want to have ideas and things about how to pay for the pictures, and I will be working through that. At the moment, I meant to talk to most of those people this week, but I've been dealing with the joy that was basically sorting my family out, and that's kind of taken over the mental capacity space. That is one of the things going on. It's how much mental capacity space do I have dealing with, well, job applications and family being unwell. Anyway. On the subject of that public lecture, it will have tickets which will be open to anyone to book to come along. And so you'll be more than welcome to come, and everyone will be able to come to it. They have lecture theatres which are able to accommodate a lot of people. So if people book their tickets, they will put it into an appropriate size theatre. Usually there's a dinner afterwards as well, which again, everyone is always invited to come along to. Again, if they tell them how many are wanting to come to the dinner afterwards, they sort out the suitable venue. They're fairly good at that, the Lawson Department of King's College London. And yes, it will be recorded and put up live. But yeah, if you want to come see it in person, you'll all be more than welcome. So, without much further ado, let's skip on. So historically, Sturdee... Okay. Let's get into some of the opinions of officers, and this is something which I haven't covered as much in Long Patrol, but that's because I thought it was more suitable for the live. Sturdee is one of those officers who is trusted. Okay? If we are talking about the Grand Fleet, historically, in this time, why are you picking Sturdee? Well, he's at the Battle of Jutland, so he's already there, so we don't need to move him geographically from anywhere else. But who are the choices to take over from Beatty if anything happens to him? Well, you have Madden, who is Jellicoe's Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Charles Edward Madden. You have Sir Cecil Burney, who is Jellicoe's deputy, second in command of the Grand Fleet. And you have Vice Admiral Thomas Henry Martin Jerram. Now, here is the thing. Burney directly commands 1st Battle Squadron, as well as being second in command of the Grand Fleet, and is a very good officer who I honestly should do a profile on, but is also one of nature's second in commands, and is very good as a second in command. As for what he wants to do, he is far more a battleship officer than a battlecruiser officer, and Jellicoe doesn't like mucking around with his senior command. He likes to keep his senior command in place. Then we have Thomas Henry Martin Jerram. How do I put this? He's already sort of deployed independently. He's in Commonwealth Firth. He is in his own space. He is a good officer. He's in charge of 2nd Battle Squadron, and he has a certain affection. But he is also... Let's put it this way. There is a reason he goes on to become Commander-in-Chief of the China Station. That's his sort of... He's far more an independent small command than an independent large command. He doesn't necessarily, unless you're really drilling into him, remember that he's going to communicate with everyone. So, you have that issue. And then you have Madden. Vice Admiral Sir Charles Edward Madden. Chief of Staff. Jellicoe's right-hand man, and the person who is, along with Sturdee, is overseeing the introduction of the 15-inch ships to the battle fleet. probably doing it more importantly work for Jellicoe, in his opinion, than Sturdee. Now, Sturdee himself, he's in charge of 4th Battle Squadron. He is, well, he had the command at the Battle of the Falklands. Jellicoe would not probably describe him as one of his closest confidants, but he certainly trusts him slightly more than he trusts Beatty. But the thing is about Sturdee is Sturdee has a habit of learning from his mistakes. And one of the things he is good at is communications, and he is experienced in battlecruiser operations. So therefore, he is pretty much your number one option. If you're going to replace Beatty in a hurry, your options, if you're going from the Vice Admirals, is basically him. Now, interesting enough, if you want to drop down to the Rear Admirals, there's Hood. Hood is a very good option, and he's in command of 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron. But the thing is, I don't see the Royal Navy dropping down to a Rear Admiral. I don't see them doing that when they've got Vice Admirals available. Also, it's far easier to replace someone who's going to be in charge of a battle squadron than it is to replace someone who's going to be in charge of a detached battlecruiser fleet. It needs to be someone who has a certain level of political cachet for the public. And the victor of the Battle of the Falklands has that kind of cachet. If you're going to replace the victor of the Battle of Dogger Bank in emergency, you need to be able to reassure the public, and you need to be able to reassure the politicians. And Madden, Jerem, Bernie, all these are good officers, but none of them have that. So, Sturdee is it. And I would like to point out, before we start going, well, was Sturdee really trusted by Jellicoe? Well, if we consider HMS Royal Oak is in the 3rd Division of the battle squad of the battle fleet, of the ground fleet, which is in 4th Battle Squadron. So the brand new 15-inch gun ship is trusted to Sturdee. And he does, and again, this is the interesting thing. What does Sturdee do? Sturdee has a brand new 15-inch gun ship. Doesn't bother it. He makes the same decision as Jellicoe does. He's got HMS Benbow. It's an Iron Duke class. She's more than up to the job. He doesn't need to jump into a new 15-inch gun ship for it. And that is the sort of style he is. This is why I think Jellicoe, for all the things he isn't particularly keen on Sturdee, and he does to an extent blame him from Coronel, etc., which is perfectly accurate, but there's also other factors involved in terms of trying to manage politicians, i.e. Churchill. There is the factor that he does make the same decisions in a similar style as Jellicoe. He's not going to jump ships just because he has to. And in fact, he only does jump ships when he jumps ship. When he jumps from Benbow to Hercules, in fact, which is where he's pictured on, he jumps to Hercules because of the damage which Benbow receives during the Battle of Jutland. So, pretty much, he's consistent. Thank you, Ron. Let's see. Nightbot's critiquing someone. I haven't seen the message it's critiqued. Caps lock was on. Sorry, Bill. So this is the scenario you're dealing with. Sturdee's there. Historically, he's already out of battle. And he fits. And he's about the right rank. And he's about the right choice. So pretty much he is the only option once you work through. Your realistic other option is Madden. So that's your other option. But if you go for Madden, who ends up, remember, as Deputy Commander Grand Fleet when Beatty is the Commander-in-Chief Grand Fleet, and Madden is the guy who regularly hands Beatty his on a plate, it's not really, well, how do I put it? Madden's a good option to go with, and could do it. But the trouble is, again, it's the politics of it. And it is a politics scenario. It's all, once you're talking about fleet commands at any point, it's a political appointment. We'd love to all say, you know, these commands, they're entirely about who is best for the job. Best under what criteria? Because if you're using as best as in most capable military commander, they might be good at the best. They could well be the best at that job. But if they do not couple that with effective political communicator, able to talk to the press, able to manage their image and manage the wider communications, then they're not going to be good enough for the fleet command. You make that person the chief of staff, the deputy commander, the person who's able to just concentrate on the war fighting while the person above does the rest. So Bernie, again, good officer, but he's one of nature, as I've described, one of nature's second in commands. He's very capable, but he's one of nature's natural second in commands. And that's the trouble, is he is Deputy Commander of the Grand Fleet. Somerset? I'm not sure where you're dragging him up from. But no. It's the Vice Admirals who are available in the Grand Fleet and the Battlecruiser fleet are the ones you have to look at this point. Because they're going to be ones called on. And Somerset, no, I don't think so. Now, Battle of Dogger Bank. This is an interesting starting point, but also it's an interesting point to consider. We cannot change BT before the Battle of Dogger Bank. We have to change them after the Battle of Dogger Bank. Why? Because the Battle of Dogger Bank, as we all know, culminates in the sinking of Blucher, where HMS Lion has been injured and is temporarily immobilized, being repaired, and the signals that go out from her, instead of directing the fleet to continue on with attacking the rest of the Germans, and potentially there's at least another battlecruiser of the Germans damaged, potentially another one could have been also damaged, they could have, you know, taken them out quite happily. Or at least caught them up and done severe damage to them. Instead, they're all ordered to concentrate on Blucher because of a communications error. The thing is, a competent commander wouldn't do that. Sturdee wouldn't have done that. He would have ordered and made sure the signal that went out to his officers was to carry on engaging the enemy first scouting group. And that's the first thing, because if first scouting group gets severely mauled at Dogger Bank in 1915, then the German approach to the whole North Sea is going to be massively different. It just is. The Germans, instead of you know, doing the operation they're going to be doing, they will not be pushing those. They won't be able to push them. Port Chicago, you're pushing Somerset Calthorpe, and I've been trying to remember which one officer that was. He wasn't a vice admiral in Jutland. He was still a rear admiral. In fact, he was second. He was in a rear admiral in the second cruiser squadron on the HMS Shannon. He's a rear admiral. He's not a vice admiral. So no, he's not going to get given command of the Battlecruiser fleet. So basically, if the Battle of Dogger Bank goes successfully, sorry, distracted up, but Paul kept putting Somerset in the chat, so I was going, I can't remember, there wasn't a Vice Admiral Somerset on the list available at the time, and I went, he's on the Rear Admiral list. So, hi Dan Freeman. So, what happens? What they're sort of happens if this battle goes to the way British would like it and it could have done, is the Germans are going to be significantly affected. If the high seas fleets, if the first scouting group loses, I don't know, a couple of their battle cruisers, let's say, along with Blucher, that is going to completely wipe out a lot of their ideas and going to massively shift the balance of force in favour of the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy is then going to be completely not only going to have a commanding speed advantage over the German fleet overall, but the battlecruiser force will outnumber the Germans almost 3-1. It doesn't matter how well the German battlecruisers are built. It doesn't matter the fact that they are designed to engage battleships, not win a fight with battleships, please don't, but engage battleships, because they are supposed to, in the event their battleships are outnumbered, they are supposed to engage the other enemy battleships to buy time for their battleships to fight and win their battles versus the enemy battleships, and then engage those ships. Probably buying time by sacrificing themselves, because they'll probably end up getting destroyed, because a battlecruiser fighting a stand-up fight against a battleship is going to only end up one way. There are options, but it's going to have to be a very disparate in terms of generations. But, and this is the important thing, if the Germans have lost their battlecruisers, then their entire modus operandi is going to change, because they can't do those high-speed raids. You can't do the raids on Hartlepool, Scarborough, those sort of things, if you've got slow ships. If you haven't got the battlecruisers, you can't do those options. And as John South says, if they lose the battlecruiser at Dogger Bank, do they learn lessons requiring shell handling that they did as they would require surviving? Yes. They wouldn't learn the same lessons of shell handling. But I also don't think the German High Seas Fleet actually comes out. I think at that point the German High Seas Fleet has to go even more passive and defensive, because they've lost their scouting element, they've lost their fighting element. Their entire ability, their entire battle plan had always been to try and draw in a section of the Royal Navy fleet, outnumber it, beat it up, and then slowly beat up the British fleet in detail. Not to fight the whole British fleet. And that plan was always to take in the battlecruiser fleet or something like that, which was to be separate off from the Grand Fleet. The thing is, if the first scouting group has been annihilated, your ability to do that has gone, because you've got nothing that stands a chance of even getting anywhere close to the battlecruiser fleet if they pile onto full speed. And you've also got the problem that the Grand Fleet can also still be coming in. And you, remember, your fleet, you take pre-dreadnoughts with you everywhere. You take those Sovereign-style battleships with you wherever you go, as the High Seas Fleet, to try and make up your numbers, which makes you even slower as a battle fleet. So honestly, the German High Seas Fleet becomes truly a fleet in bleeding, basically not doing anything if they lose the Battle of Dogger Bank. So you can't, in many ways, have this happen at this point, because if you do, you change the war completely. There might not even be a Jutland. In fact, there's odds are there isn't. Odds are World War One becomes even more of a there is a fleet here and a fleet there scenario. And that's sad. But if the High Seas Fleet is sitting 18 knots after 30 hours of sea, I'll eat my hat. Yeah. I think I'd do a Bart Simpson. So let's consider the Battle of Jutland as it is. The Battle of Jutland as it is has several points which are interesting. One of those is that roughly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, information comes through, which is basically to the effect that the Germans aren't at sea. Or rather, Scheer isn't at sea. And this comes because the Director of Operations goes down to room 40 and asks them where Scheer's call sign is. Scheer's call sign is, of course, still back in Wilhelmshaven. Why? Because as room 40 would have said, if they'd been asked where Scheer is, Scheer changes his call sign when he goes to sea. They knew this, they'd have told the person that. But no, the person decided that they were smart. Again, this is where it becomes important. When you're asking questions, do not be the kind of person who goes, "You must only tell me what I ask, nothing more, nothing less. I ask for a precise information, I expect a precise answer." Because the precise answer may be an incorrect answer. If you ask where Scheer's normal call sign is, Scheer's normal call sign is still in Wilhelmshaven. Still transmitting from there. Okay, if you then go and tell people Scheer is still back in Wilhelmshaven, the High Seas Fleet is not at sea, that's the Germans and not a German fleet isn't coming. The reality is, though, if you'd ask where is Scheer, rather than where is Scheer's call sign, room 40 would have told you. If you'd asked room 40, what are the Germans doing, room 40 would have told you. So again, this is an important thing to remember. It's important for all sorts of scenarios, especially intelligence, but all sorts of scenarios in life. Sometimes asking the vaguer question is the better way. Asking the precise question gets you a precise answer, but a precise answer can be wrong. The precise answer of, where is this call sign? It's the wrong question. Where is Scheer? It's less precise. You're asking the same question, really, because you're asking about where his call sign was earlier. You're not showing off your own knowledge of what his call sign is and all those things, but you're asking, where is Scheer? You'd get a different response. John South, if the German fleet starts hiding in ports earlier, did the UK think about carrier raids early in 1919, raided carriers in 1917 and 18? More than likely. In fact, honestly, the British will probably be thinking about carriers a lot earlier. If the Germans are still hiding in ports the whole of 1915, basically. So that seems like such a long 19th century attitude. Well, the trouble is the Edwardian Navy does still have an impact on the Navy, and I'll be talking about this at certain points. But what we have here with Jellicoe is, on very little information, Jellicoe manages to cross the German T twice. You see, Jellicoe gets that information. And then he sort of slows down, and so does Beatty. And about 3:30, Beatty spots the Germans. The Germans are spotting him about 3:22. But well, that's what the Germans claim, and the British are about, well, we think it's about 3:30. The question is whether you enter it in the log when the first person's around. I think I see a smudge on the horizon, versus when they say, I think we're sure we've seen the German ships. And I think that's the differential. It's roughly 8 minutes, and I think that's the differential. Because honestly, whilst people make a lot of fuss over German visual systems and how they enable them to see at long ranges, I would say they're not so much better. That 8 minutes, they're going to be completely and utterly sure what they're facing, differential between the Brem and the British. I think it's probably about, it depends on what point you note it down. I reckon it's probably in about a 5-minute period. Anyway. So about 3:30, about 2, yeah. It's about 3:30 they see each other. And that begins the run to the south, and then the run to the north. And that takes place over roughly a 2-hour period. And then we have this battle space take place between roughly 5:30 and roughly 9 o'clock at night. So the entire battle takes place roughly, well, let's be honest, roughly in 5.5 hours. So, what are the issues with this battle? There are a few of them. There are some absolutely insane issues with this battle, I have to admit. One of them is that during the entire run south and run north, Beatty signals Jellicoe, I think it is twice. And neither are complete signals. Beatty relies on flags to communicate with 5th Battle Squadron. And at several points, Beatty leads his Battlecruiser fleet to get in front of the Grand Fleet and be at the front of the battle line. He is pushing to be there at the front. All these things are great for glory, they are terrible for actual operations. I would add, you also have the fact that whilst the Royal Navy is certainly suffering from very bad shells, the German fleet get a bit of a battering. And whilst the British do lose more ships than the Germans, it's a very close run thing. And if the fighting had gone on any longer, if there had been more salvos exchanged, more gunfire exchanged, then the damage received would undoubtedly have been far greater. Far, far greater. It's one of the things to think about. At this battle, as I've said before when I did the profile of the Battle of Jutland and where the fleets came from, the British bring 28 dreadnought battleships to fight, and they bring 9 Battlecruisers. 8 armoured cruisers as well, if you want to count them. The Germans bring 6 dreadnought battleships, 6 pre-dreadnought battleships, and 5 Battlecruisers. That means they actually have less capital ships, capital ships, that is, at the battle than the British have dreadnought battleships. Incidentally, that means the 8 armoured cruisers and 9 battlecruisers and one of the dreadnoughts are complete overmatch to their Germans in numbers. So they are complete overmatch and should be probably used as such. In addition to this, the British have 26 light cruisers there. The Germans have 11. The British have 79 destroyers there, and they're usually slightly bigger and have heavier gun armament. The Germans have 61. The British have a seaplane carrier, the Engadine, there. So the British have a lot of advantages going into this action. A lot of advantages. And if the battle wears on, that 151 tons, pretty much, of broadside versus the Germans' broadside of 61 tons, and I'm rounding both up by a bit, but let's be honest, I've called it 151 tons, it's 150 tons and 760 kilograms, and I've called the Germans 61 tons, and that's 60 tons and 879 kilograms. Percentage-wise, I'm fairly sure the British one is closer to 151 than the German one is closer to 61, but it doesn't really frigging matter. That's still 2.5 times, near enough, the firepower, and 2.5 times the broadside weight. So if you have a longer fight, if you have another engagement, if you find time for a third firing match, the sheer amount of firepower will tell its toll on the German fleet. So, to change history for our scenario, what happens in the... Well, I put it down to 15 months, and then I was doing the maths in my head when I was recording this long patrol, etc. earlier today, and I went, well, hang on. It's January to May, so that's 12 months. Well, 12 takes it really to the end of January, and then May is roughly 4 months in from that. So actually, it's more like 16 months, okay? More like 16 months. So I had to come up with a reason for Beatty to be out of things. And basically, my view is that a car crash is the easiest way. Either he has massive injuries or anything else, but I didn't fancy the option of a train accident because I don't fancy the option of having unnecessary deaths on my conscience. And I didn't fancy any other scenario because that would involve other people. Whereas getting drunk and driving a car, that strikes me as a potential thing Beatty would do. Hello, Andrew Mosher. And Peter Dawson. And IO2. Hello. So, that's the point. The thing is, it takes place in the Christmas party season, so we're talking roughly from about the 15th of December onwards, which means that by New Year's they would have made a decision very quickly. Anything happens to him, he's in hospital, they have a consultation. Okay, so you've got, let's say he's got 2 broken legs, 2 broken arms, and a punctured lung. Okay, right then, you're going to be recovering for about a year. Sorry, you're going to be replaced. This is where things get interesting from our perspective, because if he's going to be replaced, and replaced pretty much immediately, this adds another factor into our equation. It's another reason why I keep concentrating on the Vice Admirals. Because you need to make an instantaneous replacement. You can't afford to have anyone grow into the post. You're going to go and pick from your ready officers at that rank. So that's why Rear Admirals like Hood, like Somerset, what's he called again? Somerset, Somerset Gough Calthorpe and, well, the others wandering around are just not able to be chosen, because as good a rear admirals as they are, and they are good rear admirals, they're not available. Also, I think you have to think if the Royal Navy had been looking for a replacement and had been prepared to look at junior officers to replace Beatty, well, you have other options. I would argue that Tritt, who is a senior rear admiral by this point, whilst he's a senior commodore at this point, would have actually made more sense for a rapid emergency promotion than some of the rear admirals. Technically junior, but let's be honest, the Harwich force is used to standing alone, and again there's that factor of politics. You need someone who's known to the public. You need someone... This is a posting. The Battlecruiser fleet requires, especially because of the way Beatty has run it, requires a political reputation. It requires a status. Michael Cooch, visions of time-travelling Dr. C at the party saying, go on, have another. No. I'd be cutting his brake cables, but we'll leave that to one side. Anyway, so here are the command structure changes, and this is where things get really very interesting. Especially for me. It requires a showman. It does. The Battlecruiser fleet requires a showman. Sorry, my nose is itching. It requires someone who's got the ability to stand in front of the press and go, don't I look dashing? And the trouble is, a lot of the others don't. But we can consider this officer in many ways, but let's be honest, he does photograph well for the time. He has a full set of hair, and he has the good jaw. So, historically, we have Commander Vice Admiral David Richard Beatty as the commander. His chief of staff is Captain Rudolph Walter Betnick, who had served in the Grand Fleet staff and various other positions, and was a well-liked and respected officer, even though there are some issues there, I think, in his handling of the senior officers, the senior flag lieutenants under Beatty. Then we have Flag Lieutenants, Commander the Honourable Reginald Almer Ranfurly Plunkett, and Junior Flag Lieutenant, Lieutenant Commander Ralph Frederick Seymour, who tends to get all the blame for communications issues. But as I said before, really you shouldn't be blaming him, because in the nicest way, he's the most junior of the staff officers there. There are lots of people there who should have been checking what he was doing. Yes, he is a lieutenant commander. Yes, at that point, you do expect him to be acting as an adult and not need to be supervised. But you are also a full captain and a full commander who are on that staff, who are just as senior and are wandering around and have eyes. Use them. And the flagship is, of course, HMS Lion with Captain Alfred Chatfield. Now, here is the thing. When an admiral changes their post, they take officers with them. Same as today, generals and admirals do that today. They take some of the officers they will take with them between multiple postings. They will inherit some staff. They'll take on new officers to replace some staff, but they'll also take some with them. Now, there are some interesting officers who I can predict will go with Sturdee. Two interesting ones are William Milborn James, who will replace Plunkett in a flash. Why do I know this? Because Sturdee pretty much does everything he can to keep this officer with him wherever he goes, as long as he can do. He's a naval intelligence specialist. He goes on to become Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence under Hall. Sorry, pardon me. In World War I. In World War II, he goes on to become Admiral in charge of Naval Information. In other words, he's a very, very skilled, very knowledgeable officer when it comes to information, analysis of intelligence, and the decision of where the information needs to go. Next officer who'll be coming with him. Because basically whatever happens, as long as he can keep him until he can get him promoted, and then when he gets him promoted, he basically goes to his good friend Madden and goes, "This is my flag captain Parker. He's amazing. Take him on as your captain of your fleet." And fleet captain is how you tell whether a fleet's a proper fleet or a fleet in name only. If they have a fleet captain, who's basically a senior sailing officer, naval officer, and captain officer, basically senior sailing officer is what we describe as. But his duty is to advise the admiral on the sailing condition of the fleet and to basically be the admiral's number one, sidle up to other captains and go, "Excuse me, Danny." "Yes, Henry? How do I put this? So your handling of your ship is not quite up to par, and you need to fix it." "Really? Or what?" "Or the next person you're having this conversation with, you won't be having biscuits, and you'll be a formal meeting." "Of course, Henry. What advice do you have?" "Well, let's see. You could do this, 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 and this." So this is a very experienced officer. He'd also had been an executive officer on HMS Lion before and all these things. So I think in the nicest way, he comes with him. When Sturdee himself has to change from Bembo to Hercules after Bembo's damaged at Jutland, he takes Parker with him. So these officers are going to go with him, and they are experienced gunnery officers. They are experienced intelligence officers. They are very different. They'll keep Betnick because that provides continuity, and Sturdee doesn't have a chief of staff in his post. He doesn't have that level of staff. He doesn't need that in 4th Battle Squadron. But he does have flag lieutenants. Now, interestingly enough, do I think Seymour changes? Yes. Can I tell you who gets chosen? No. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Sturdee reaches down to some of the lieutenants who've been promoted to lieutenant commander who were with him at the Battle of the Falklands. He had a whole posse of them with him. They were very good officers. They were good young staff officers. And he would literally pick them off. These officers would all go off to various appointments. Possibly Chatfield would get swapped with Parker. Literally. Chatfield would go and suddenly find himself in charge of HMS Bembo. Go deal with it. I have no idea where Plunkett and Seymour would end up, but I'm sure they'd find postings suitable of their status. What does this do? What does this command structure change do? Well, it's going to change the information flow completely. For starters, these officers are coming in with a senior officer who's used to bringing in other teams and working with teams. Okay, one of the things that Sturdee's forced to do by the Falklands is get experience in getting officers involved in his plans who he hasn't worked with before. He's worked out his methodologies. He invites them to dinner. He sorts things out. So this idea of Admiral Thomas, Rear Admiral Thomas of 5th Battle Squadron, turning up in the 4th and sitting there for weeks and not actually meeting Sturdee. Well, he didn't actually historically meet Beatty at all before the Battle of Jutland, and they had it gone. There is no chance. Evan Thomas would literally arrive in the 4th, and would have someone turning up within about 5 minutes of his ship being moored in position with a note saying, "You're cordially invited to dinner aboard the flagship with Sir Frederick Charles Doveton Sturdee. Please bring your senior officers. The dinner will be an informal affair with good food and refreshments." That's the sort of thing straight out of Sturdee's playbook. Sturdee is like that. He is maybe not as much of a showman, not as much of a glory hound as to be fair, Beatty is, but he is far more actually of the Nelson mold of let's have a meal, let's get together. One of the reasons why him and Jellicoe are probably not the greatest friends is because Sturdee doesn't actually seem to enjoy golf as much. And Jellicoe's way of making friends with officers is to invite them to play golf. And Sturdee possibly once or twice did explain to him that he preferred to wait for him at the 19th hole and have a drink. But because especially the speed Jellicoe played golf at, Jellicoe did golf at a run. He did speed golf to get around it as fast as possible, because there aren't that many sets, and there's lots of officers who need to there, and there's only one course, and Sturdee's sort of sitting there going, "I'd rather not be doing this." So yeah, but he does believe in having meals, in getting to know his people, so that would be going on. Also, communications. Let's consider James here. In a nicest way, this is a person who builds their entire naval career in collecting information and disseminating information. That's his entire naval career, is collection, organization, dissemination of information. Pretty much. Every one of his staff appointments are to do with that. So this is someone who Hall describes as an excellent analyst. There are two things which could bring into this scenario, one of which I won't be including. The fact is, even as one of the reports you get from the Battle of Jutland is that when that message comes through that they aren't at sea, James actually sends a message to Hall, which doesn't get through, asking whether or not the Germans are at sea, because he's doing his job as his intelligence officer of 4th Battle Squadron. If that message is coming through the whole chain of command, through the receivers, from the head of intelligence, senior flag lieutenant of the Battlecruiser fleet, that message actually might reach Hall in time, and it might well be that whilst they get a message at 2 o'clock saying there's nothing out there, by 2:30 they know that there's been a muck-up and they are racing on ahead again. That is a very real possibility. I'm not going to include that in this, but I am going to include on the slide later on. There is going to be the timeline for if that happened. It's incredible. And by refreshments, you understand the Battlecruiser Fleet Procedures book. I'm also fairly certain that with Parker, James, Betnick and Sturdee forming a group, I wouldn't be surprised if Battlecruiser Fleet's Procedures book gets rewritten very quickly. Well, Betnick sort of knew and was already annoyed by and causing, and the reason why Lion, etc., and certain other ships didn't have those same interesting ammo handling practices was because Betnick found out and was upset with it. The thing is, if you have Parker, Betnick, and Parker and James backing up Betnick and Sturdee telling it from top, I wouldn't be surprised, and we'll get into that, if that's fixed. But they have a few months to do some more things. Hello, Verdun. Hey, Dev Squad. Well, this does take place. This change would be happening in late December, January 1915, early January 1916. So there is time for all sorts of things to take place before the battle. And we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, these are the changes. And I'd like to see if the chat thinks it's fair, because basically I've gone through and I've taken through the officers who Sturdee did take with him, and it's the scenario I can see fitting. So, you know, it made sense to me, but I'd like to know if the chat agrees with me. Yeah, the Battlecruiser fleet had a habit of leaving their flash doors and all sorts of things open to allow for more rapid ammunition movement. That's a reaction question. Battlecruiser actually in the Falklands was poor. I don't know what Sturdee's reaction to that was. His reaction to that was a lot of gunnery training. That's what he was trying to organise. But the trouble is, he is rapidly moved into 4th Battle Squadron, which then becomes... 4th Battle Squadron is considered one of the most gunnery capable squadrons in the Royal Navy in its period. It consistently scores pretty darn high, up there on the accuracy scores in the ground fleet. So that's got to be partially down to Sturdee. Thank you, Bill. Okay. I'll just remove the anti-flashing. They had all sorts of bright ideas. As John said, without the unfair blame, it would be nice for Seymour and very beneficial for long-term life expectancy. Yeah, I don't expect Seymour to survive the change. Don't take this the wrong way, but I have a feeling Sturdee would look at him and go, "But you're not a qualified communication signals officer." No, sir, but, you know, my connections have meant that, you know, I've been very useful to his lordship in my post. But you're not a qualified signals officer. Look, I will find a suitable post for you. Go enjoy it, Lieutenant Commander Seymour. James, find me a signals officer. Marnus, Captain of Tiger was advised, this is how you accelerate gunnery. Do this. He saluted, went back to Tiger and didn't. Yes. Poor ammunition handling practice was taking place in the ground fleet too. They just weren't found outlined at Battlecruiser fleet. No, it wasn't taking place on a scale, it was. And it was being dealt with rather quickly. There were a lot of officers. You have to remember, whilst the same ideas were occurring in the ground fleet, there were a lot of senior officers who were going around shutting it down as soon as they found out about it. So whilst yes, it's happening, it's not being percolated. Whereas in the Battlecruiser fleet, the senior officers were actually pushing it, barring Betnick. Beatty didn't turn Henderson down for anything. Henderson's not around. Henderson's off doing other things at this point. He's on, I think, one of the vessels as an executive officer. Somerville was the officer who Beatty turned down. Somerville was a career signals officer, and Beatty turns down Somerville in favour of Seymour. The trouble is, by this point, Somerville is now a commander and is off doing other duties and wouldn't take second place to James because he's senior enough to, and it's supposed to be a lieutenant commander, so I can't bring in Somerville. Agincourt was an interesting one. They were misbehaving, but they were being told off about it, and that's, as I said, a difference. And that's the difference in the sort of you've got the misbehaving going on, but it's being told off. And in Agincourt's case, it was very clear it wasn't all of them and all of the how'd I put us? All of the turrets which were misbehaving, just some of them. And even then, when Agincourt got a new senior gunnery officer, that was soon dealt with in a very affirmative way. It was how do I put this politely? He reminded certain turret commanders that if they continued to do such poor handling, he would find a way to fit them into their own guns and fire them from them. At this point, Henderson is executive officer aboard the HMS Erin. And it's December 1916 when he's appointed to the anti-submarine division at the Admiralty. And as said, yes, that's good. The ground fleet's also in better position to practice gunnery. No. Some of the selling off took place just before Jutland, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there are issues at some points. That's good. By affirmative ways is like the chief mechanic of a 5-foot range and a B-45 dealing with performance on affirmative way. It's an issue. Verdun. My traditional confusing Henderson and Somerville continues. Oh, and anyway, books for the bookshelf. They are good. You know, I can understand confusing them. They're both good officers. I don't think they would become... I think they become fish food after being fired from the guns. Fairly certain that would be the case. Actually, let's pause. So, what happens to the Battlecruiser fleet as a whole? Well, this is where things get particularly interesting, because I know this picture is HMS Repulse and HMS Renown leading other British capital ships in the 1920s, but it's a cool picture, and I couldn't find a picture of the Battlecruiser fleet that had them all in there looking as cool. So, what would change between December 1915 to May 1916? Well, for starters, Sturdee would probably be trying to take them for gunnery practice, which means he'd be trying to take the whole force up there. That's going to have an impact. He's probably going to want to have 5th Battle Squadron, again, to swap over for when he's not down there, but he's going to be trying to do gunnery practice, because he is in favour of very accurate gunnery. Sturdee, remember, had the joy at the Falklands of seeing the inefficiency, as he termed it in his report, of the firing of his ships. And whilst... Hello, Jack Ray. And whilst, to an extent, that was blamed on the age of the ships and the fact that they were first-generation battle cruisers, he wasn't necessarily taken in by that assessment. Add to that, he's got with him these officers. And as we've said before, these officers are fairly good. Basically, if I put it politely, in staff terms, the Battlecruiser fleet with these changes has gone from a very notable staff, which are very razzmatazz and very, you know, they look good in papers, they have the right titles and the right connections, to a staff who are exceedingly capable. They've gone from... How do I put this politely? They've gone from a glazed donut to a pack of Mr. Kiplings. They've gone from something which looks lovely and is really, really fancy, but there's only one of them, and frankly, yeah, to a whole pack of Mr. Kiplings. Exceedingly good cakes, for those who don't get the reference. And I think it would be a combination of the two. I think Sturdee would probably be doing some firing where he could in the Firth of Forth. There aren't really many places though to do manoeuvring and firing. The Firth of Forth is a really busy seaway. That's far more problematic than the people in Edinburgh. Far more problematic is actually the timing of people moving backwards and forwards. Thank you, Jack Ray. So the thing is, they would then have to move up, and I think the thing is, he would also use it as a way of training the squadron to work together and operate together. So if you're cruising up from the Firth of Forth up to Scapa Flow and back again, you can't really do that you can't really do up and back in a day, but you can do a day up, a day's gunnery practice up there, and a day down. And so it'd be a 3-day trip. And he can use that time to work up the battlecruiser fleet and get them used to working together. And I think he would do that. I think that's the sort of thing which Sturdee would think was very important to do. And that is a sort of thing which is going to start to have an effect on the fleet. It's going to have an effect on the force. It's going to get them working together. It was something which actually Beatty did look at, but Beatty decided it would be too problematic. It would require too much political capital because they've been brought south to be the defence for the south. That's why they've been brought down the First of Forth and be able to. So going north for training would cause trouble. But I think Sturdee would be less put off by the political battle of that. Or rather, Sturdee would see that as a necessity for the training perspective. Because again, that you're talking about someone whose squadron was one of the most highly trained squadrons in the Grand Fleet. It regularly won recommendations and commendations, even from Jellicoe, who was not one to be exactly uncritical of gunnery, for gunnery practice with the 4th Battle Squadron. So they've done well. Sturdee's brought that team with him. That's what he's going to want to continue. Now, there is, of course, the fear of submarines, but this is the point at which Sturdee is going to be going, well, this is why we have destroyers, and this is also good practice for us, and we run at full speed. Because he will say, let's run as fast as we can. I think even with 5th Battle Squadron, they could probably manage a 24-knot movement. And so they will get used to moving at 24 knots. Now, I think they would actually be practicing with 5th Battle Squadron. I think they would be trying to get all the forces together, and I think that would prepare the force better. But I also think you would go for... whereas you have the issue with Grand Fleet because of its size, that you do have pockets of spaces where you can have that desire to ignore some of the best practices which come with gunnery in favour of... well, how do I put this politely? In favour of speed of gunnery. The thing about the Battlecruiser fleet is it's small enough that if an Admiral really wants to, and wants to stamp it out, they can. Now, the thing about it is if we look at 4th Battle Squadron, and this is the point I want to sort of put together, because I do realise people listening are people who have really researched the Grand Fleet, etc. in World War One. So I'd say if you're doing 4th Battle Squadron, if we consider the ships in 4th Battle Squadron, you have Royal Oak, Superb, Canada, Benbow, Bellerophon, Temeraire, and Vanguard. Now, I know, as I said earlier, I have heard of ships having a similar tendency towards speed of fire and therefore not necessarily following through on the safety procedures that you're supposed to, i.e. having flash doors open, etc., to smooth and speed up ammunition handling. But I've never heard any of those ships mentioned in that discussion. And if we consider the officers involved, you have the 3rd Division is under Sir Alexander Duff, and of course 4th Division is under Sturdee himself. The Royal Oaks commanded by Crawford Macklin. The Superb is by Edmund Hyde Parker. The Canada by William Nicholson. Benbow's the flagship, and that's under Henry Wise Parker. Bellerophon is under Edward Francis Brun. Temeraire is under Edwin Veal Underhill. And Vanguard is under Captain James Douglas Dick. That is his name, James Douglas Dick. Again, all those officers come from the side of the gunnery school where you do not start playing fast and loose with explosives. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying you've gone from having an officer who cared about speed of fire to compensate for the lack of ability to train to fire accurately, to an officer who will make the conditions right so you can do some training to fire accurately, and who has a track record, especially since being part of the Grand Fleet, of implementing and promoting those officers and selecting those officers who are very much in favour of tighter control of explosives. So, I think that's going to affect the Battlecruiser fleet. And as Sean Marcus pointed out, Sturdee might also decide to occasionally wander the Battlecruisers south to, deter the German raids and actually show off. They could well do that, but there is a problem of you could cause scares if people see ships suddenly approaching randomly outside and they're not expecting them. They could think they're Germans coming back to raid them. So you're going to have to be making sure people know that the Navy's coming and the Navy is coming there. But yes, I wouldn't be surprised if he also does some southern wonders as well. And Blackburn Masters, if the Battlecruisers are running at high speed from the base to the training area, could they use the time in between for high-speed maneuver training? They probably would do. Battle doctrine training. He would use the whole thing as one large training exercise. I.e. simultaneous turn away, all sorts of things like that, yes. So, this is the point. I'm not changing the shells. In fact, I'll get into that discussion in a bit, but there is a small problem if the battle goes to plan in that the shells might not get changed. However, excuse me a second, my shorter elder sibling has just appeared outside the window waving at me, so I'm not sure why, but I'm going to quickly check. What's up, Wilsis? Oh, you want a pop move? Be back in a second. Oh, caramba, sisters. But at least she didn't try and move herself and hurt herself. So that's she's learning. All I need to know is to get her to do it in daylight. Right then, now I've dealt with my sister. Alright. So, what is the other thing that could be done? Well, it's unlikely. It's unlikely. But there is something that occurred to me, and I want to discuss this in the live, but I didn't put this on Long Patrol because, in my experience, the people who watch the live are more happy to have me occasionally wander off into potential random areas. Now, traditionally, the Renown class are commissioned in September and August 1916. For them to be viable, they would need to be commissioned earlier. Thing is, HMS Repulse is actually launched in January 1916, and Renown is launched in March 1916. So, if you consider Renown is launched in March and completed and commissioned in September, so she's commissioned within 6 months of her launch. Whereas Repulse traditionally is launched in January and commissioned in August, which is, again, 6 months. So that's roughly similar time. But for them to be included in the fleet, they would need to have been with it for at least a month. And it would be up to Sturdee to be there, but Sturdee would probably make the same decision. So he would need to have probably Repulse commissioned by April, end of April latest, 1916. Which would mean she would have to commission roughly 3 months earlier. Now the thing is, Sturdee was one of the officers who, along with Madden, was pushing through the 15-inch gun ships for Jellicoe. They'd been concentrating on the battleships, of course, because they're what they needed for the Grand Fleet. But Sturdee has the contacts and the information and the people about the Battlecruiser fleet. And about the 15-inch gun ships. So if Sturdee is responsible for it, and if Sturdee's doing all the gunnery training and pushing everything up, I think he might try and push. Now, to shave 3 months off the commissioning time for Repulse is going to be frigging tough. For starters, you are probably going to have to do a lot of work. However, think about where she's being built. You see, she is being built by John Brown in Clydebank. Clydebank, of course, is in Glasgow. If Sturdee is based in the Firth of Forth, and let's be honest, that's Edinburgh, it's not that far away from Clydebank. So he and his staff officers could be making a nuisance of themselves on a regular basis, turning up in John Brown's and going, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Now, the thing is, the lovely, I do say this, lovely Renown, is in Govan. And Govan is also in Glasgow. So, them going to Glasgow a lot to try and accelerate the construction of their battlecruisers would be highly likely. So I don't think you get both in time, and I think it's highly unlikely you get either in time. But I wouldn't be surprised if these vessels actually come into service earlier because of concerted badgering efforts by Sturdee and his staff. Andrew Marshall, didn't HMS Canada have 14-inch guns, the only ones in battle? I think so. That's good. You have to remember there's a lot of gunnery training going on even with the Grand Fleet. And there are a lot of officers who realise there are problems with the shells, but it's having the political capital to change the shells in the middle of the war. That is the thing. Jutland gives the capital to get the shells fixed. And it's political capital. It's not lack of knowledge. There is a reason why Jellicoe, when he was 3rd Sea Lord, was pushing for the shells to be investigated and be checked, and for the armour to be investigated and checked. During question, Sturdee to JB and John Brown and Company. Is Repulse finishing? Is Repulse finishing? Is it trouble? Yeah, I think they might be getting daily messages. It'll be fun. Erin had the weird 13.5-inch shells, not 14-inch. Yeah, I think so. Anyway. So, pre-battle. Now, this is going to be an interesting thing, because if, as I suspect, he has been doing the training I suspect he would be doing, I would add on to this that I would suspect whatever he's doing, even if he hasn't done the training, been able to do training, he has A, been meeting with Evan Thomas, etc., and B, he would not be allowing his fleet to separate up as much as he did. Why? Because you're talking to Sturdee, the guy who learnt that when you split up forces, Coronel happens. Sturdee is obsessed with concentration of force by this point. You'll see it later on in his career and everything that's come. He's always trying to concentrate his ships. He always wants to keep his ships together. He does not understand the concept of splitting his forces up and not grouping them together. So, saying that, the first big change, I don't think you have the break going on between the 5th Battle Squadron and the rest of the Battlecruiser fleet. I wouldn't be surprised if the attached squadron finds themselves as included as they could be, and B, potentially, for at least for their high-speed manoeuvring before they get into an action, limiting themselves to roughly 24 knots so they can keep the fleet together. But I doubt, even if Renown, and I think it'd be Repulse, which would be ready early, not Renown, because Renown is the one that's not ready till September 1916. Repulse is actually the one which was ready in August, so is the one which could be and was launched in January. So it was launched. Well, actually, no. That's the thing. I think she takes historically 7 months to complete. So yeah, it would be interesting. 3-4 months off. You'd have to take 3-4 months off her commissioning time to get her in time. I think it'd be Repulse. He'd be on. Because Renown's only launched in March 1916. There is no way you were getting her in service and ready by the end of April. So there is no way. Fairfield Governor, good. They are not miracle workers. So that's not happening. John Brown are good and could do that in that time frame when they consider when it's launched in January 1916, especially it's launched on the 8th of January 1916. So basically, if it would be pretty much the first thing you do will be go, when's she going to be ready? I don't think, though. I think kind of like there's a reason I've put him still staying in sort of in Lion, etc. I have this feeling he would not be jumping around ships just for the sake of jumping around ships. He's going to be in the flagship he's in. He's not going to be jumping to different ships for the sake of it. And I don't think he goes into Warspite or anything like that. Again, the 5th Battle Squadron are attached, not part of the Battlecruiser fleet. And again, it's kind of like and it's kind of this. We're talking about Sturdee, the guy who has, in his order of battle at the Battle of Jutland, HMS Royal Oak, a brand new Royal Sovereign, a brand new Revenge class, Royal Sovereign class, brand new 15-inch gun battleship. And he's not on her. He's on HMS Benbow, which is an Iron Duke class. And that's the same, let's be honest, that is the same as the ship which Jellicoe is on. Jellicoe is on HMS Iron Duke. And by the way, this is the other interesting thing is, Jellicoe attaches his ship, Iron Duke, to 3rd Division, which is part of 4th Battle Squadron in Jutland. So that's the thing there. That's the squadron which Jellicoe is in. So again, it's another reason why I think he'd trust Sturdee to go off and do this independent command. Sturdee did believe in divisional tactics. So yes, he might well want to talk to 5th Battle Squadron as acting as a division, Michael Cooch. But I have also a feeling he's going to want to keep them organised and integrated as much as he can as a force. So whilst, yes, he believes in divisional tactics for an actual fight, he also wants to keep them together. And I think you are jumping ahead by asking that question right now. At the moment, we're not in a battle. So we don't really want to be talking about battle tactics because I've still got to get to the battle. So I'm going to answer as vaguely as I can and then wait till we actually get to the battle and get into that. Hello, MC Legend 13. It's not really hyperactive to be accelerating Sturdee, Renown, or Repulse. It's actually quite easy for him to do, and it's an easy train ride to sort it out, and an easy wander for him to go and push off. Also, it's gonna sound strange, but when you're making massive changes, unless you want to micromanage as an admiral, you want to be able to give people days to do it without you dare overseeing them. So unless he's prepared to micromanage them constantly, he has to be able to give them days when he's not there. And he doesn't want to keep travelling down to the Admiralty, that's far too far away, etc. But getting the train from Edinburgh to Glasgow and back, that he can do. And without causing too much disruption. And give them a day to get things sorted and get things pushed through without him staring over their shoulders. That's good. I'm assuming the yards are working 3-8-hour shifts or 2 12-hour shifts, 3 active 24 hours a day. They don't seem to be at this point in World War II. World War One, I mean. No. They don't seem to be doing that in this point in World War One. They are working a long day shift, but they are not working 24 hours a day. So, again, I think Sturdee would probably be pushing for that one. I don't think there is any nicest way impact of Sturdee being in charge of the Battlecruiser fleet that's going to affect Jellicoe's ideas for what he wants the admirals to be in spring 1916. Let's be honest, Jellicoe is consulted like all all senior fleet commanders are consulted. Beatty was also consulted. And in spring 1916, so that would mean Sturdee would be consulted instead of Beatty, which might have an impact and change things, but I don't think Jellicoe's views will change just because Sturdee's in charge of the Battlecruiser force rather than Beatty, because let's be honest, by the time the Admirals enter into service, Beatty's not going to be in charge of them, so there's no point worrying about who's in charge of what at that time, because it's going to be completely different by the time they're actually in service. So it's not going to affect your perspective at all. Take care, Paul. Sherman also probably can be used or use the PR stunt. The Admiral visits his new ship to show faith in the Britain's naval strength. Yes! Visiting the shipyards and all these things. Yes, it's regular visits to check on the progress of the new ships. Yeah. Yeah, it would definitely be used as PR. So what's the other things that are going to happen pre-battle? Well, there's going to be communication going from the get-go. There's going to be discussions going from the get-go. This is an important thing to consider. Sturdee has a different track record of communication than Beatty. He does have a habit of communicating. He's also got officers who are going to be doing the communication for him. In many ways, when I've talked about Beatty and staff, the point is the failure to communicate from Beatty's force to Jellicoe's is not just a Beatty problem, it's a staff problem. In the nicest way, the commander-in-chief of a force should not have to be reminding his staff every 20 minutes. Are you updating our senior commanders? Are you updating the senior officer? Are you updating the Admiralty? No. Send specific messages to the Admiralty, yes. I was sending specific message. That's updating as to our position and current action, read the enemy. That should be a standard report going out. That is the standard which they were supposed to be following. So, did Dave Beatty make visits to the yards? No. Well, no. How to put it? He did occasionally, but he spent more time going into the director's offices and having nicer drinks than actually going around the ships. He wasn't really bothered looking around the ships, whereas Sturdee was the type who liked to go and look around the ships. No, it wasn't. That surprised you, I know, but let's be honest, it's World War I, not World War II. There's not the threat of bombing raids, there's not those things going on, and honestly, there's, especially at this point in 1916, not the pressure. When they start, it's going to be something interesting, but it's basically once they start accelerating the production because of having to rapidly build escorts because of the growing submarine war, then they do go to 24 hours a day and they are pushing it through. But the number of yards actually working 24-hour shifts in this point in World War I is very, very low to virtually none. Yeah, Sturdee is the type who asks for forgiveness rather than permission, but does tell you what he's doing. Beatty is the type who doesn't tell you what he's doing, just goes off and does it, and then goes, "Wasn't I great?" And the commander's going, "Oh God, what have you done, you moron?" So yeah, but it's a whole staff problem. In the nicest way, honestly, you could say Walter Betnick. You can Rudolf Betnick. You could put the blame on him because he's the chief of staff. But again, the comms officers comms and communications are usually the responsibility of the flag lieutenants, and so basically it's Plunkett versus James, and James is a very different officer than Plunkett. So I think James will be shown. Hello, Ariel. That's good. I've already explained that thing earlier about the room 40. I've already discussed that, so I don't want to get into that again and repeat myself. But actually, that's not to do with a room 40 report. That's to do with the way the question was phrased to room 40. Thank you, Ariel Taylor. That's very kind of you. Basically, the question was asked, where was a specific call sign, instead of where was shear. And because the person was being very, how'd I put this? Very showing off. I know the call sign of shear. The trouble is they didn't realise that when shear went to sea, he changed his call sign. So they were asking a stupid question. But I've been over that. Verdun, the only example I can really think of 24-hour shift in that period is basically when Fisher sits on the deck and goes, "Build it for me quick or I will poke you very hard with stick, dreadnought." He didn't do that himself. He had other people do the poking. He would have. I'm doubtful he would have gone down to the Tyneside shipyards in case of Sturdee, because his ships are being built in Glasgow. So he'd go there. Both those ships are being built in Glasgow. He's not really keen on Courageous, Glorious, and Furious. No worries. Yeah, that's an example of bad staff work. It is an example. Basically, one of the senior officers from operations asked room 40 a very clever question. He probably thought, and it caused all sorts of weirdness at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So basically, they start, they've got to the point of battle. And here is the first thing you'll notice. This is at 3:30. Look at how big a distance there is between the 5th Battle Squadron and the 1st and 2nd Battlecruiser Squadrons. There shouldn't be that distance between those formations. They're not 2 separate small fleets. They're supposed to be 1. Sturdee would not do that. Sturdee does, as has already been brought up in Makouch, believe in divisional tactics. So he would have his independent squadrons acting as divisions. He would have them being able to coordinate and run themselves rather than being centralized control from the Admiral sending out strict orders. Do you do this? Micromanaging each ship. It's run as divisions. Your division works together and each pair of ships work together, sort of thing. In the divisional idea. So you work as your smaller, you slot in, you understand from exercise, etc., where you slot in. It's something which benefits a highly trained smaller force that they can slot in and maneuver around each other. But, you do work together. You don't be separated by miles of ocean. So this is why I think the Battlecruiser fleet would have been approaching at roughly 24 knots. Because they wouldn't have been that separate. Going at 24 knots keeps them far closer together. Trying to push the Battlecruiser fleet as fast as it can go causes you trouble. So that's the scenario you've got going on. And this changes the entire run to the south, run to the north. For if we consider the run to the south, if you've got, yes, the Germans will have a speed advantage under that scenario unless he lets his battlecruisers have their head and go as fast as they want. But it also means that for the run to the south, the entire way, if they stay within range to be able to fire at the British ships, they'll be in range of Evan Thomas's 5th Battle Squadron. And the thing is about 5th Battle Squadron, is, yes, they have problems with their shells, like all British ships do. Yes, you do not have the Green Boy shells, and Lord help us if the British actually win Jutland beyond reasonable doubt. There is a small chance out there that people still do not allow them to say, well, your shells must be good enough because you won the battle, and don't actually do the proper research, and Britain ends up in the Second World War with terrible fricketing shells. That is a possibility. We could end up in the Second World War with terrible frigating shells because we win Jutland. But let's leave that to one side. I don't think it's likely. I think there's still a 70% chance that things don't go as well as they could have done. And the Royal Navy use that as the case to go to the manufacturers. Fix your frigating shells, you morons. Cousins, you didn't pick up that M word. And goes on from there. But there is a chance. But the point is, if you keep 5th Battle Squadron working with 1st and 2nd Battlecruiser Squadron, so they're working together as a solid formation, the Germans to come in range to fire at 1st and 2nd Battlecruiser Squadrons will be in range of those 15-inch guns, and those gunners and their gunnery systems. And 5th Battle Squadron have about the best direct-to-firing systems of any ship in the Royal Navy at this time, and they have hand-picked some of the best gunners in the fleet, and combine those two things together, along with some of the best guns the British probably have at the time, or frankly, arguably ever have in service in their battleships, ever actually have in service rather than being on paper. You are talking about a nightmare for the Germans, because they come close, yeah, they get the fight, but they get beaten up. So the odds are there might actually be less fighting on the run south, because they might chase. But also, here is the other thing, because I want to point this up. Let's say they still meet at 3:30. Guess what is the first thing Sturdee's going to do? What is the first thing Sturdee's going to do when he sees the first scouting group? He's going to report to Jellicoe, isn't he? He's going to send a message through to Jellicoe. We have spotted the High Seas Fleet. We are engaging. And what's Jellicoe doing? Jellicoe's going to speed up. Jellicoe is going to speed up at this point. Jellicoe is probably going to be hitting roughly 20 knots. Not 12 knots, not 14 knots, 20 knots. Coming south. So while this is going on, Jellicoe is going to be racing down. And that's it. Oh, too. So we'll basically be going, why? Hello there, HIC scouting group. Or first scouting group, it's called. I came here with 2 battlecruiser squadrons, a full squadron of US, the most powerful battleships in our fleet. And the world. Enjoy. Yeah. Admiral, it might last until Henderson, but if he gets a job, it will all be on his priority number 1 on O Frigates, or Cunningham might actually storm the Admiralty after one battle in the Med. Oh, I love the way you think it lasts till Cunningham has a battle in the Med. And so, yeah. Basically, Frank Well, yes. Hey, Jellicoe, the Germans are out. I've bumped into the first scouting group. Jellicoe going, accelerate. And that's a good thing. Not a random message going through. No. This becomes the run to the south, the sprint to the south, and all these things going on. This is where these messages start coming. It's not waiting on on Commodore Goodenough later going, hang on, has anyone told Jellicoe what the frigate's going on? No? Oh, I'll tell him then. Because that is the glorious thing of actual history. It's that Jellicoe doesn't really know what's going on. He has some idea from listening to some of the signals that there might be fighting going on. He doesn't know until Goodenough actually sends a message through to him and goes, Admiral Jellicoe, I'm not sure if I'm giving you an update as to our current fighting position. And Jellicoe's response is, you're fighting? Well, and that pretty much comes at 4:30 from Goodenough. So we're talking, that message goes for about an hour later than it could have done. Jellicoe has an idea there's a fight going on, but that message is that the Goodenough's message is basically, I have spotted the entire high seas fleet. We do not just have the first scouting group out here. That's good. Do you think Beatty wanted to be a hero of Jutland and delayed reporting the contact, or was it more just him not being good at vision corner? I think it's just he doesn't think about these things. He's so busy thinking about a battle, and not one of his staff reminds him. No one reminds him and goes, Sir, we need to report Jellicoe. There are some messages which get through to Jellicoe, and he does start trying to head south, but it's not really accurate information or detailed positioning information or all the stuff he actually needs. No, he's Commodore Goodenough. He's in charge of... Let's see. He's in charge of 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron in the Battlecruiser fleet. And, yeah, he's called William Goodenough. His full name is Sir William Edmund Goodenough. He becomes an Admiral. He serves with the Royal Navy till 1930. He dies in January 1945. He actually died in Coulsdon, Surrey, in 1945. And interesting enough, Coulsdon, which is a little borough of Croydon, is where my mum was raised as a kid. It's where she was. So yeah. But I was a good officer. He served as president of the Royal Geographical Society from 1930 to 1933, in fact. Freeman, not a wonderful service, but USNR, Operations Special 87, a few nuggets of place, time, speed, and one's own situation so matters. Yes, it really does. Yes. Basically, it's the point at which someone needs to remind you what's going on. And as Michael says, if you read the Beatty approved official history initial drafts, he was the hero of Jutland. Yeah, I've got that up there. The official Jutland and the Jutland scandal. Renan, of all the hours I've listened to you and Drac, I don't think I've had a stronger wait what moment before. It gets better. Now, real terror. British fleet had an early wireless system once battle was joined. Why didn't they use it? Would it not have allowed a better tactical view of what was going on as a whole? Oh, it would have done. They did have wireless technology in place. They were able to communicate quite capably with each other. The trouble is, it's not choosing to use it. It's not that they can't use it. It's that some of the officers don't use it. Let's put it this way. Sturdee is very experienced using it. Remember, he used it a lot in the Falklands. He used it a lot coordinating around the world. So for him, thinking about using radio communications is almost second nature. This is another thing which caused an occasional issue with Jellicoe, because Jellicoe swears Sturdee prefers to use radio communications than flags. And Jellicoe still kind of likes the idea of flags because they can't reveal the position of the fleet to the enemy by them listening for the radio signals, because the main way the British have of tracking where the German High Seas Fleet, despite the German High Seas Fleet claiming it's spies in Wilhelmshaven who are telling the Royal Navy what we're doing, the main way the Royal Navy track the Germans is where they're broadcasting from, because they broadcast so loud and so long on their radios. So leaving that to one side, the British, understanding that, are not always that keen on using radio communications. But you do have officers like Sturdee who are keen on it. Oh, trust me. And Runon, were you not here when I was talking about the order of battle for the 4th Battle Squadron at the Battle of Jutland? The fact is, there was an officer there who is literally called James Douglas Dick, who is captain of HMS Vanguard. I don't know what to do. And there's, believe it or not, the other divisional commander in 4th Battle Squadron, because there's Vice Admiral Sturdee, who commands directly 4th Division as well as commanding the squadron, is Sir Alexander Duff. And please note, his name is Alexander Ludovic Duff. He goes on to serve as the Commander-in-Chief China Station, but yes, Ludovic Duff. Did they have directional antennas? Not really. No, Runon. They had broadcast antennas, which is another reason to sort of gauge. But the thing is, and this is the point, people tend to defend Beatty and go, well, he didn't want to broadcast his own position. He should, in broadcasting updates, the Germans already know where he is. The person who has to be careful about broadcasting is Jellicoe. And Jellicoe actually has to send signals at certain points going, will you please give me information? Dove Squad goes back to the German radio, seemingly not having a power dial, just an on-off switch. Yep. Dan Freeman has just learnt the power of how to manipulate the Nightbot. So, then we have the run to the north. Now, here is the point. I'm going to say this. There is an advantage if you have a closer linking up with the 5th Battle Squadron. Because even if you're running north at 24 knots, the Germans do not overtake them. But also, if you're going south and going north and you're closer with them, what does that mean for the Germans if they try and get closer? It's going to be more difficult. So whilst, yes, historically on the run north run, we get that sort of famous phrase from Beatty, there seems to be something wrong with our ships today. A, I doubt Sturdee would say that. B, you're going to have better flash control going on, because even if you haven't managed to implement everything, implement even a 75% flash control is going to reduce the likelihood of a ship blowing up completely like Queen Mary, like some of them did, dramatically. But more importantly, they've got to fight the whole squadron. And if he's practiced his divisional tactics and got his fleet maneuvers and been doing the rapid maneuvers up and down, while practicing his movements up to the Firth of Forth, up to Scapa Flow and back to the Firth of Forth, etc., you have got to consider that by the time you get to Jutland, by the time you get to late May, early June 1916, the training of the battlecruiser fleet is going to be such they can do to turn away under fire. But more importantly, they're going to turn as a group. And most importantly, they're going to have the 5th Battle Squadron with them. So instead of the Germans being able to concentrate their fire on the battlecruisers at any point, they're going to have to be fighting the 5th Battle Squadron as well. And I don't know about you, but if I'm I'm first scouting group of the High Seas Fleet, the ships I'd be most worried about and scared of are going to be 5th Battle Squadron going, hello! So whilst 5th Battle Squadron are probably going to be taking a pummeling, they're the ones which can most take it out of this fleet. And the thing is, if 1st Scouting Group ignore the rest of the Battlecruisers fleet, if they've been doing gunnery training, that's not a good thing either. So if they're a concentrated force, they are far more lethal to the Germans. And running north, the thing is, there's potentially some of the German Battlecruisers also get sunk on the way north. Or, alternatively, the British ships don't get sunk and the Germans just get damaged and the British just get damaged. And I think that's likely. Dan, stop taking advantage of the fact that you can wind up a Nightbot, okay? I wonder if there's a good enough island in the South Pacific name for the Commodore's father. Yes, I think so. Beatty sounds like he had Bull Halsey syndrome or vice versa, and their staff being too cowed to point out what they are forgetting. He didn't pick staff officers who were necessarily going to fight back. Or necessarily had the experience or confidence in their skills to fight back. Adrian, I think Invincible still might go down, but because that was a mutual kill. But yeah, it's basically the run to the north. You've got the run to the south. You're losing Indefatigable and Queen Mary, and then you have the run to the north. And I'm not sure if you do lose those ships still in this fight. As you say, there is a bit of a mutual killing going on, but I think you have. Well, how do I put this politely? You have enough reactions going on with 5th Battle Squadron. Also, 5th Battle Squadron, if they are properly used, they are full of captains who are prepared to take their own initiative. If you consider HMS Malaya is a good example of this. In the Battle of Jutland, she turns completely on her own without waiting for the order to do, because she looks at where she's supposed to be turning and goes, that's going to get me frigating smacked. I'm not doing that one. And that is what the entire the Grand Fleet have been training towards. And that is Captain Algernon Boyle. And Algernon Boyle goes on to become a 4th Sea Lord in the Royal Navy later on in his career, but he is, you know, he has famously arguments when he's 4th Sea Lord between 1920 and 1924 with Beatty, and he's also the guy who at the Battle of Jutland basically doesn't wait for orders to turn his ship. And the 5th Battle Squadron are full of officers like that. They've got Arthur William Craig, Morris Woolcombe, Edward Montgomery Philpotts, and, of course, Hugh Evan Thomas. Now, if they'd been properly integrated into the Battlecruiser fleet, there is going to be a very different fleet you're going to be fighting than the one you fight at Jutland. HNO Defender, so you're saying that Warspite will still find ways to do donuts while taunting Germs to come and get it if you think you can take me? More than likely knowing Warspite. Juicy, given the kinetic damage the Germans are reporting from the non-functional 15 shells, they might lose at least 1 ship to damage, even if no criticals hits are scored, if they have more chance to fight. Yes. Shone, what about New Zealand? New Zealand is New Zealand. I am not... In the nicest way, if New Zealand and Warspite decide to tag team doing the donuts, I am fairly certain the entire High Seas fleet ends up dying, okay? I think the entire thing, the entire purpose of Sturdee's staff and himself is to try and keep New Zealand away from Warspite, because if the two tag team together, we are going to be dealing with a very dangerous world. But leaving that to one side, I think I think New Zealand carries on getting through the fight as much as he did. And that's good. So Beatty was a delegate who specifically chose a staff who weren't confident or competent enough to act on their initiative. He chose staff largely for their his perceived political connections, and by that he meant social standing, i.e., what their title connections were to lords and ladies and that sort of thing. So he chose people on that level. So they were very, very good gentlemen, but not necessarily good staff officers or good at their, or even qualified in their role. And that is the thing with Seymour. He's not really qualified for the role he's doing. And Beatty turns down Somerville for Seymour because of Seymour's connections. So the trouble is, if you're not really qualified for your role and you're trying to act as if you're qualified in your role, what do you tend to do? You tend to take your lead from the most senior person in the room and echo them because they must be right. And the trouble is that senior person in the room is Beatty, who doesn't really understand staff work either. He's a very competent captain. This is the thing. Beatty was a good captain. Beatty is not really someone who you want going anywhere with his own staff. What was the Royal Navy policy at the time for flag officers if they got injured? Would they allow... They would allow them to continue serving if they were fit and well, but if they were still in hospital being taken care of and recovering, they weren't going to. So this is why I basically had BT break both legs, both arms, have a punctured lung in the accident. If that didn't work, then I'd also be waiting behind a tree, a bit back from where the brakes failed, and I would whack him over the head with a shovel. But we can't alter course. The Admiral has not ordered it. I do not care that we are bearing down on. Yeah. Basically, the thing is, this squadron has reached the point at which Tyrion was trying to get his squadron to, when, of course, they had the famous accident in the Mediterranean fleet when many, many years ago. This is the idea Tyrion wanted to put into his fleet, and this is the idea which officers like Jellicoe, like Sturdee, to an extent, with the divisional plan, and various others have been trying to put in. Officers to act independently and to exercise fort. Ronan, if the Royal Navy decides to make a Commonwealth-class escort and they build an HMS New Zealand, how much would US say that increases the survival of the escorted ship? As long as New Zealand still has weapons and is still there and fighting, I'm fairly sure that task group is unsinkable. Yes, Nazir Clarke on Seymour. Okay. You whack him over the head before or after you dig his shallow grave. Why would I dig him a shallow grave? He's going straight into a sea burial. Anyway, so the run to the north happens. Now, the thing is, though, you might have noticed earlier, I was talking about communicating with Jellicoe. And this is where things can get really interesting. Because if, let's say, communications start at roughly 3:30. If they start at 2:30, you could have intentionally had the battle at 4 o'clock. An hour and a half earlier than historically. But if it starts at 3:30, and he's racing south at 20 knots. Beatty, Sturdee's racing south at 24 knots. Then turns and races north after he bumps into the High Seas Fleet. And, well, let's put it this way. If that's going on, then the odds are the fleets bash into each other somewhere, I would say, around the 4:30 to maybe even earlier, but I would reckon it would possibly the actual battle would take place about an hour earlier, at least. It could be even earlier. So the fleets might engage as early as 4:30, even earlier than that. You could be talking about 4:15. So let's think about that. In the original 3.5 hours, which Jellicoe has, he crosses the T twice and does this. Whilst Beatty's doing all this weird manoeuvring and keeps getting in Jellicoe's way and being stupid. Because basically he's trying to get at the headline so he can have glory, sort of thing. If you have a commander not doing that, you have proper information coming through. If they have literally been transmitting every 15-20 minutes, the staff have been transmitting an update as to where they are, if they're engaged with the enemy, what their direction is, and what their speed is. Imagine what Jellicoe could do with that information. If Jellicoe has had those reports coming in from the engagement, let's say it's coming through every 15 minutes. He gets one at he gets one automatically at 3:30. At 2:30, well, he gets one automatically. They see the fleet, see each other. Let me just check my deal. They see the fleet at. Why is my brain gone blank? They see each other roughly about 3:30. That's when they're happy they see each other. So if he gets from that point onwards, and he's getting a notification every 15 minutes, an update of where they are. Might even do it more often than that, but at least every 15 minutes. Imagine what Jellicoe can do with that information. Now, the point is, again, as said, that we've changed quite a lot of things. We've changed so far the ammunition handling procedures, because Sturdee would change those. You've changed the training in terms of accuracy and maneuvers because of having those trips up to the Scarpa flow for proper gunnery training and back. You've changed the fleet coordination doctrine and had them going at 24 knots and keeping the 5th Battle Squadron with them. So you've changed, and the reason I haven't gone into specifics of what happens with the ships in this one is I would need to wargame this many, many times to give you an idea of what might affect. Because also there's the fact that the Battle of Jutland, when you wargame it naturally, and you have, unless you program in some really interesting stats into there for the commander's characteristics, you should have a victory. With the mass and the firepower the British have an advantage. And, I have pointed out 151 tons worth of broadside versus 61 tons. Well, the thing you've got going on in this scenario is you now have the fleets formed up. And I think, again, Jellicoe will go to cross the enemy's T. This is where things can get really interesting, because with all that information, he's probably prepped, he's in position, he's crossing their T. He's going to be blasting over everything they've got. So they're going to pull away, okay? They're going to do their turn away. Because that's Shear's maneuver. That is Shear's only maneuver. So that happens again. But I think the difference is that instead of trying to do this maneuver, where they're trying to get in front of the ground fleet, I think the Battlecruiser fleet under Sturdee will be positioning themselves to keep an eye on the High Seas fleet. So instead of trying to join the battle line, they're going to keep distant enough to be able to see what the High Seas fleet are doing. So they'll be able to send messages through to Jellicoe. So yeah, they've come back, they're turning around. So Jellicoe will be able to follow them. Jellicoe will know what they're doing. So instead of having those minutes, those tens of minutes working out what's going on, repositioning himself and doing it again, when he crosses their T again, he's going to have constant information coming through. This is what they're doing. This is what they're doing. They're here. They're here. They're here. Which means he's going to be able to engage them very rapidly again. And if they do that again, another turn away, again the same thing's going to repeat. The thing is, if you have the battle starting roughly an hour earlier, and this happens, it could happen 3, 4, 5 times. We know what happens when it happens twice, without any information helping Jellicoe out, because Beatty doesn't transmit, and that's not what Beatty sees. Beatty sees his role in the fight to fight the battle, whereas the role of the Battlecruiser fleet is to provide information to the Grand Fleet Commander to fight the battle. Yes, you can fight them if you want, but you have to provide them information first. That's the important part of the battle. And that's what he'll be doing. So the point is, I think at a certain point you will get the Germans forcing their way out by trying to fight their way through the British. At which point I have a feeling the first formation they'll bash into will be the Battlecruisers. Because the Battlecruisers will be positioned offside and will be trying to stop them getting away. So I do think you lose Battlecruiser in this fight. But I also think in that scenario you end up with a close, nasty fight. An absolute mauling brawl. You end up with a bitter, close quarters blasting out where it doesn't matter how much armour you have. It doesn't matter anything like that because you're firing at such close ranges. Frankly, it doesn't matter. You're having the thickest armour in the world would still be no good, as it might as well be piece of paper. In fact, piece of paper would mean the shells would pass straight through instead of arming and going off. So in the nicest way, it ends up that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Battlecruisers are lost in that fight. I'm not sure which ones. It's going to be luck of the draw. It's going to be the same with battleships. But I do know the German battle fleet gets absolutely mauled. The High Seas fleet, the first scouting group, will be mauled beyond belief. Anything that does get home will be absolutely wrecked. It'll make their survival sedlets look like an absolute picnic. So this is the point. Because at a certain point, Shear will try to turn away once, twice, 3 times. He might even try the 4th. But at a certain point, his only way, his only chance to get his fleet home is going to be to go through the British forces. And the British force which is going to look weakest is going to be the one which is offside, which is the Battlecruiser fleet, which is offside, holding position to tell the Grand Fleet where he is. And I think Sturdee probably races in front of him for a bit. But the thing is, there's only so much space before they get to those minefields. There's only so many miles to go. And I think that's where the Germans are heading back to try and get to safety. I think the German pre-dreadnoughts get abandoned. I think the German first scouting group gets abandoned. I think all sorts of ships get abandoned. Try and hold off the British. I think they lose a lot of ships. Renan, would that influence armor values decrease in some navies, trying to gun for overpens and putting the weight into compartmentation redundancy? I'm not sure. As said, this battle would have a very different impact on L navies than Jutland itself did historically. Think about fifth battle squadron is going to have a prime position. A high seas fleet turned into prime position as they try to keep spinning on the spot. Pretty much. And this is what happens if Jellicoe's getting the information. If things are working as the doctrine, as the planning said they were supposed to do, even 75% of that is going to plan in terms of the communications, which is not really affected by the enemy. It's something your own staff is supposed to be doing. It's all good. And as Verdun says, there is a chance Sturdee gets killed. He could get he could... HMS Lion could get completely blown to smithereens in this scenario. But as Verdun is pointing out, he would be in St. Paul's like Nelson. This would be there is no doubt that this battle would be a glorious victory, is how it be marked up. But there would be losses on both sides. But the thing is, as I started off this video by saying, as I'm going to say say again, the British go into this battle with 28 dreadnought battleships. That is more than equal numbers to the entire number of German dreadnoughts, pre-dreadnoughts, and battle cruisers at the fight. The 9 battle cruisers and 8 armoured cruisers that the British have there are extra. They also have 15 more light cruisers than the Germans do, and they have 18 more destroyers than the Germans do, and the British destroyers are bigger. So expect this to turn into a nasty fight with lots of torpedoes going at close range, which means those light cruisers are going to be nasty as well. Think about that, because the light cruisers are going to be fighting off the destroyers. That's an advantage the British have for fighting the German destroyers, and they're going to be launching torpedoes at the larger ships as well. I don't really know how to put this any other way than, if done right, there is no way this battle does not, in my mind, turn into, as I put it earlier, an absolutely maelstromic brawl. It just can't not. Let's see, what have I got? If we consider at Jutland, the British have 457 torpedo launchers, the Germans have 469. So the Germans actually have more torpedo launchers. and torpedoes than the British do at Jutland. The British have 382 21-inch torpedoes, 75 18-inch torpedoes. The Germans have 362 19.7-inch and 107 17.7-inch. So the major advantage for the Germans comes in their 17.7-inch, which are small torpedoes. But British battleships have, well, they have slightly less torpedoes cumulatively than the German ships do. And British destroyers have slightly less than the German ones do. British light cruisers, they have 66 torpedoes across them and launchers, and the German ones have 26. But you have to remember, light cruisers can reload their torpedoes. Destroyers don't carry reloads. Forgive me if I missed this, but is it possible that the higher number of Royal Navy battleships, the extra throw-weight durability allows the Iron to trip the Kriegsmarine before they drive through? Quite possibly. That there is going to be a severe damage. But I do not think that they will be... Let's put it this way. There is no scenario where I see them pushing their way through where the Germans do not cause sufficient damage to sink some ships of the Royal Navy. Does mass torpedo strikes on capital ships lead to everyone going down? Well, potentially. But you have to remember in some of the battles that we're talking about, if we give an example, Hood in this battle, Horace Hood, in command of 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron, gets attacked by torpedoes on several occasions, and he threads his battlecruisers through them. This is the guy who gets killed, but he threads his Battlecruiser Squadron through enemy torpedoes. So I think potentially without getting hit. So there's also that chance, and there's also the chance, of course, with torpedoes that they don't work. Death Squad. I would say with the thing that is World War I, if Sturdee goes down leading the battlecruiser fleet in the Battle of Jutland, I would say that would be probably the highest profile death of a British senior officer in World War I. I wouldn't be surprised if alongside the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier there is the tomb of Vice Admiral Sturdee, despite there not being anything in there. Because it would be symbolic. I honestly think he would be the highest ranked officer to be killed in combat in World War I. And Hipper, I wouldn't be surprised if Hipper and Shear both get killed. Because I don't see Shear keep ordering ships to their deaths without leading himself at one point. Dandron, would this war end the war earlier? Fewer experienced officers to transfer to U-boats. No American involvement. Well, you would have fewer officers to transfer to U-boats, but you would also have, and we get this discussion, night action, does it still happening? As I don't think it does. Honestly, I think if there's a brawling fight, I think by the time they reach the minefield, I think the Germans dive straight through the minefield. And this actually might cost them even more ships. Because they might enter fast without properly checking their charts, and they might end up running and throwing mines. But I reckon they charge in, even at night. They get in, as soon as they get to the minefield, they're going for safety. They're trying to get away from the British as fast as they can. So I don't think there's a night action. With the consequences of Britain maybe not developing the same night combat fighting skills it does historically, but there again you've got the night fighting which the Harwich Force, etc. are engaging in, and I wouldn't be surprised if that still leads to some development of some of that doctrine. But post-battle, well, everything depends on who survives the battle. Literally who survives the battle, because let's be honest, Jellicoe himself could get killed fighting in those close ranges. I don't think so. I don't think the Iron Dukes do get, but We might even lose a Queen Elizabeth class. There is a chance that if the Germans are charging straight at them and it's the whole fleet and it gets a close enough range, if we consider the sheer amount of damage taken by Warspite, yes, they can take a lot of damage, but they can't take infinite damage. So I think the question is that, how does this affect the war? How does it affect the battle? Well, if Sturdee survives, I see Sturdee becoming commander of the Grand Fleet after Jellicoe. I don't see there being any other option. He would have been instrumental in this victory. He'd be lauded as a national hero. He, of course, won the Falklands. He's going to be Britain's great naval leader, great martial leader. In the nicest way, Beatty might be making as much noise as he can, but it's not going to trump it. It's just not going to. If you're having to replace Jellicoe and move Jellicoe to the First Sea Lord's office, it's going to be Sturdee. I would add also some other things. One, if the Germans have lost a lot of officers from the High Seas Fleet, they're still going to probably push to grow the U-boat forces and try and do the attacks of the U-boats. But they're going to have more of a trouble getting those personnel. They're going to have more trouble crewing them. And also they're going to have another issue because, you see, how quickly do the British get the Grand Fleet up and running again and closing full strength? They again have far more maritime infrastructure. They're starting from a large number. Cumulatively, the losses are going to be a smaller percentage of their force than the Germans are going to receive. So the British will be back sooner. So the British might actually make a charge for the Baltic. If the British break into the Baltic, if Sturdee leads a break-in into the Baltic, there is every chance that stops World War I. Because the Germans are suffering enough because of the blockade on their Atlantic routes. If they lose their Baltic trade routes and the trade routes they are taking through neutrals, etc., then they lose pretty much everything that they can do. And Swedish iron ore is important. Okay, I know I talk about Swedish iron ore a lot, but Swedish iron ore is very important to the German armamentsman industry, to their armor industry. It's a very pure, very high-grade iron ore, right? So this matters. This matters for efficiency, and also matters efficiency of production, but also quality of construction of your final product when you're making armor and when you're making armaments. So losing access to Swedish iron ore because the British managed to break into the Baltic, that's not going to be good. If the High Seas Fleet has been severe damaged enough, the British can do it. So that's going to depend on how much damage has been done to the High Seas Fleet. But I don't see much of them getting out of this. I see the British taking losses, but I see the Germans taking a lot of losses. I think you'd be talking probably all their battlecruisers that were in the battle would be taken out because I think they'd have been chucked in. I think all the pre-dreadnoughts. So you're looking at least at those 11 ships, and I wouldn't be surprised at some of the dreadnoughts as well. And the rest will be severely damaged. Remember again, German dreadnoughts tended to be slightly slower than British ones. So that leads to an interesting scenario. You could well end up with the same situation going on with if the Germans are strong enough to still maintain the Baltic, then you probably have a continuation of what actually happened historically. You probably have the submarine war take off. You probably end up having the Americans come in the war and similar things, and you probably have Admiral King come out and exercise, but he'll see Sturdee in charge of the fleet rather than Beatty. And Sturdee's going to be a different character again, because Sturdee is not the type to end an exercise because he's losing. Sturdee is not going to do that. He does not care about his ego that much. He is not that inflated with himself. So he's not going to make the same impression on King as Beatty does, which could well change Anglo-American relations to an extent. If there is no High Seas Fleet, if the High Seas Fleet basically ceases to exist, if a combination of their own minefield and the brawling nature of the fight and torpedoes, and the British are down severely but the Germans are completely knocked out, then there's a very, very big, interesting thing going on. But there's also a small problem, because the British will start rebuilding almost immediately. Okay? Now, this is a problem for any Washington Naval Treaty or anything like that, because what do the British rebuild to? The British have just seen a battle where their big guns are far better. Bigger guns are better. They've just seen a battle where they ended up getting close range, but long range engagement mattered. They've just seen a running battle. So the British are going to be thinking, okay, what we need to build is continue along the lines of the Queen Elizabeth and go for fast battleships. That's the idea. That's going to be the ships which are going to look the best bet for future warfare. So the British are probably going to, the Admiral class, etc., if they are started, are probably going to be transitioned, or they might be finished. They might be built. They might need to get some Battlecruisers out quickly, in which case they will build them as quickly as they can. But they'll also start working on a follow-up class of fast battleships. And they will be 28 knot plus ships. They will be armed with as many guns as they can put on them, as good a armor as they can get, but still maintaining that speed. And the Royal Navy will be churning them out by the end of World War One. Sorry, little fly. Not sure how you got in here, but you're dead now, so I'm not worried about it either. Now, if the British enter the Baltic and do their thing there, how likely would that be to force the Scandinavian countries to enter the war against the British? The Scandinavian countries are not going to enter the war against the British. The Scandinavians are not stupid. In the nicest way, at this point, at the end of this war, if the British have just smashed the German High Seas Fleet, if the British have just done all of that, then why enter the war against the British? Why go into that scenario? Why do you want to do that? You don't. You don't need to. It's not necessary. So, I don't think that happens. I don't think that the Swedish or any of the Scandinavians will enter the war against the British. Why has something gone a bit smooth? Give me a second. Okay. Yeah, wrong one. Wrong one. Right one. Hello, that's better. Now, the question is whether this 18-inch gun is pushed for or what happens. I'm not sure if the 18-inch gun is pushed for. It might be the 16.5-inch gun. Again, there's going to be the rate of fire thing, because if you're engaging at short range, then rate of fire matters. So I think it might be 16.5-inch guns, and I think it might be triple turrets. But, you know, we'll see. Stephen Richards, if RM wins Jutland, why does Sturdee? No, Sturdee will. Jellicoe will get a claim as well. Please note what I'm saying here. Jellicoe will still go on to First Sea Lord as the great victor of the Battle of Jutland, etc., and all these things. But I'm talking about who gets the Grand Fleet after him. Because Jellicoe will still be promoted in the end of 1916. Why? Because they need someone to take over as First Sea Lord. They need it to be someone who is a national hero. They need someone who is... So that's going to be where Jellicoe's going to go. So now I'm talking about Sturdee because I'm talking about what replaces Beatty. And what Beatty... instead of Beatty, what Beatty did traditionally. Because Beatty traditionally takes over the Grand Fleet after Jellicoe. What actually would happen instead? Yeah, I'm trying to... find out why I'm out of focus, sort of thing. It's supposed to autofocus. Let me just open up my bot. Ba-da-da-da. And alright, I'm going to do something a little bit naughty. That's better. Just quickly getting the focus right. Sometimes if I do this... it gets it back in. There we go. That's good. Focus is back. And the thing is, again, as we were talking about, was if Sturdee died during the fight. This is the thing, again, if Sturdee dies during the battle because of his status of Vice Admiral and he's in command of the Battlecruiser fleet, then he is going to get a massive amount of status in terms of the British Memorial, because he's going to be the highest ranking officer, and Jellicoe will deliver a great oratory as his tomb is created in St. Paul's Cathedral and all those sort of things. So, nicest way, that's just, it's PR, okay? If anything, the Scandinavian countries probably join the Entente to get a seat at the table. Denmark would definitely like a chance to repay the walls of von Bismarck. Belong. If the 15 inches have ruled the waves, why not all the 15-inch guns on the turret form? Because the Americans are building 16-inch ships, and because other people are looking at larger guns than 15-inch guns. So I think the Royal Navy will go for 16.5-inch as they did traditionally on the G3, or 18 inches they did for the N3. I would say it's most likely 16.5-inch. Mainly because the 16.5-inch for me represents the sweet spot of rate of fire, in that they are the same rate of fire as you get from a 15 or a 16-inch gun, but they are the heaviest gun you can really do that with. And Black Masters, would the Admiral class? I doubt additional ships and of the Admiral class, but I wouldn't be surprised if all 4 of the Admiral class get quickly built to replace Battlecruiser losses. Especially after a glorious victory, but they'd want to replace them, and they want to replace them with proper ships, so yeah, they'd be pushed through. So you'd have probably a Battlecruiser fleet which would be made around two Renown, Repulse, and the 4 Admirals as quickly as you can. But there will also be a fast battleship for a squadron being built straight after them. I doubt anyone would go with 21-inch guns. The rate of fire is just annoying, and there are all sorts of problems with targeting them. Sending the characters, so G3s, N3s on steroids as soon as 1918, potentially. So, post-battle, if Sturdee's alive, then he gets the Grand Fleet after Jellicoe moves up to First Sea Lord. And if, depending on what happens to the High Seas Fleet, if there's enough of them, they hold the Baltic, and it continues much as they did historically. But with Britain having the glory of going, we won the Battle of Jutland, despite it turning into a nasty, vicious brawl. If the German High Seas Fleet is sufficiently mauled that they are no longer a force to even worry about, then potentially very quickly the British turn up in the Baltic. And that will probably very quickly affect the war. I'm not saying it would end it within a year, but I doubt the war goes as far as 1918. Derp Squad, the Washington Naval Treaty limited to 16-inch guns. The London Treaty also kept the 16-inch limit. They were hoping for a limit of 14-inch guns, but it was never really put through. That's the second London Naval Treaty where they actually were hoping 14 inches would get through as the limit, and the only people who built battleships according to the second London Treaty rules were the British. Everyone else activated the escalator clauses. So no. And as for if Sturdee does recover Beatty, get the Battlecruiser fleet, probably not. Probably goes to Madden or someone else who's actually at Jutland. Sturdee might get Beatty might get the Battlecruiser fleet back if it's still around when he recovers, but I think the Grand Fleet goes to Madden, not him. And I think at that point, I'm not sure whether Beatty probably gets sent to the Mediterranean or something to give him a nice, command, but he's not going to become First Sea Lord. So, post-war. So maybe neither the Habsburgs nor the Romanovs fell. Well, that's an interesting thing. If the British get into the Baltic and they do manage to get it through, then there can be all sorts of interesting things going on as consequences for that. But that's wider political things. Post-war, we have an interesting scenario. We would have a completely different set of senior officers at the top. We could well have Jellicoe consider as a continuous First Sea Lord for slightly longer than he is historically. After all, he's got the political capital of having won Britain's greatest battle. But there's also the possibility that he is completely worn out and retires in 1919. If Sturdee's still live through the battle, then I see him taking over. If he hasn't lived, then I'm not sure who takes over. Again, I'd be tempted to buy Madden. Honestly, I'd be very tempted by Madden being the one following up, because Madden's a very experienced, very good officer, and will also have enough of the luster of the victory, especially if he's taken over the Grand Fleet after Jellicoe. He will be a natural choice for First Sea Lord. So, what do these impacts have on things? Well, I'm not going to go into the wider stuff, because the Russian Civil War and all those things are kind of fun things to get into, but it's going to be a lot of butterfly way. But we can talk about the Washington Naval Treaty. If my suspicions are correct as to what happens after the battle, with fast battleships being the key of the day and admirals possibly being rapidly completed, then I do not see how you go through a Washington Naval Treaty with the idea of we're going to limit battleships to 35,000 tons. The British could well have capital ships have as many as 8 of them in service by this point, who are all 40,000 ton or plus. They could have more. They could have 12 in service. Because if they've built 8 45,000 ton fast battleships, 28 knots, armed with, 12 15-inch guns or 12 16.5-inch guns, that is going to be very persuasive in terms of, this is our standard. So Washington Naval Treaty is going to have to adapt to whatever the new current standard is. And the new current standard is probably going to be 45,000 tons, and it's probably going to be 16.5-inch guns. I have a feeling that perhaps the British will not have got 18-inch guns into service at that point. But there is also the chance the British have gone with 18-inch guns, that they have again, triple turrets, and they've gone for 12 18-inch guns. If they've gone for 12 18-inch guns on, I don't see them getting a 28-knot ship on less than 50,000 tons. They could theoretically do that. They could. There are enough yards they could theoretically do that, and they could theoretically, if they really, really push. And you must remember, this is in a scenario where potentially, potentially, especially if World War One ends quicker, they have the opportunity to push it. And no naval treaty, and they've just won World War One with a glorious naval victory, so everyone's going to want to secure Britain's naval power. That you could be talking about the British having 8 of those in service with 8, 12, 18-inch guns, ships of able 28 knots. Whatever the scenario is, I see the Americans probably turning around and going, we would still like a treaty. The British probably going, yeah, we would like a treaty as well, despite the fact you guys didn't get involved in World War One. Or even if they have got involved, even if it's gone that way, I see this happening. And so the Washington Treaty will reflect that. This has, of course, consequences longer term, because if the treaty limits are set at 45 to 50,000 tons and 16.5-inch guns, Lord help Germany, Lord help Japan. Because the thing is, if you're going to build a ship to fight 2 treaty battleships, frigate, you're going to have to need a very big ship and a lot of infrastructure to support that ship, to be able to build that ship. And that's going to ruin the Japanese economy. But if you're the Germans and you're coming in, and the baseline battleship you're talking about in the world is a 28-knot, 12, 16.5-inch gun ship, just think what you are going to have to do to try and make your equivalent of Bismarck in this timeline. And remember, they're still probably going to be limited by a Treaty of Versailles, which is not too dissimilar. Remember, the naval clauses in the treaty are written by the British, and the British basically planned those from the get-go. So the British get to implement the Naval Treaty of Versailles. The German economy is still going to have the maritime industry collapse that they had post-World War One. They're still going to be limited to 11-inch guns. So you've got Scharnhorst and Gneisenau in a world where there are 16.5-inch gun battleships going around, or maybe even 18-inch gun battleships going around. No. Those ships are just not going to figure in anyone's calculation. 4 admirals going around is going to be scary enough for anyone to deal with. And Paul Bestwick, this is revised Jutland. Do you see the possibility of any high seas fleet ships striking their colours? It's potential, but I'm doubtful, because honestly, in kind of mauling close range fights, I think it's going to be very quick demises. Now, the thing is, again, if war ends a year early, as it might do, it could well change the effect of the flu pandemic. It could also change the whole RAF scenario, because if war ends in 1917, then you never get to the 1st of April 1918, where the RAF was historically formed. So you have a peacetime consideration going on. And in peacetime consideration, the fleet might well take the view that, well, there's no urgency of war, so do we need to build a Royal Air Force? The war's over. Why go to the burn of setting up a separate service? It might well destroy the Royal Air Force in 19 before they even begin. So you might end up with the Army Air Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service continuing on. You might still get a Royal Air Force, but if you consider if Sturdee's around as First Sea Lord, well, he was one of the ones who had major reservations about the aircraft on carriers and on ships being part of another service rather than the Royal Navy. So he might well not agree to that. Might go, well, yes, you can have our land-based aircraft, but not our sea-based ones. But either way, if war ends early, it's a very different scenario. If war ends later, well, again, it's going to depend on how useful Engadin's aircraft were and whether they did any strikes with the aircraft or any follow-ups like that. If they've done anything like that, then I do not see them giving ground on the aircraft going over to the RAF, especially the ones aboard carriers and the ones aboard capital ships, especially Sturdee. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting scenario. That's what. Don't you think the UK will make a fuss about how much they're giving up to go down to 16-inch guns and get some concessions for them? No, I don't think they'll even allow themselves to go down to 16.5-inch, below 16.5-inch guns. It'll be a case of we're at 16.5-inch guns. You don't need to build new ships though yet, do you? Because they're all on the age thing. So nice way we had the advantage in guns and firepower. The British will be that. It will be that blatant. It'll be very much, especially if they've won Jutland, it'll be very much we are joining this because we are kind to you, not we are joining this because we need to scenario. So do not expect any concessions from the British to get anything they want. Everyone else will have to give concessions to get the British there. That's, I think, the route the British will take. So, sorry, I meant the limit will be 45 to 50,000 tons. Yes. And that's the standard displacement limit, not the full load. Too. Sharn's nice in a world where the minimal threat is a renown or hood. It's not a nice world for them. Probably going to be. Well, here's the thing. In the nicest way, in a world where you've got four Admiral class, you might not keep the renowns around. The treaty notes might come out. The renowns might be some of the ships which go. Because the British have built whatever's come after them. Or, there again, the British might say, if they go, right, we'll keep all the 15-inch and above ships. So they will keep the renowns, they will keep the admirals, they'll keep whatever surviving Queen Elizabeth class there are, and the 5Rs. So let's say, I think there's probably a Queen Elizabeth might be lost. So I wouldn't be surprised if you end up with 9 15-inch battleships and 6 15-inch battlecruisers, including the renowns and the hoods, and those renowns and the admirals. And then you end up with 8 fast battleships types which have either 16.5-inch or 18-inch guns. Either they're carrying 8 18-inch guns, or they're carrying 12 16.5-inch guns, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the 12 16.5-inch guns. In which case, that's the British fleet, and the British will be not accepting anything below that level. So, yeah, good luck. That'd be 25 ships. I don't know. 12 plus 9, yeah, plus 6, 27 ships. So you got, yes, the flu pandemic, whereas the first outbreak was almost certainly in the US, so if no American expeditionary force, the pandemic in Europe will be less serious. Who knows? That's what I imagine in peacetime the RAF is formed from the Army Air Corps, but the Navy keeps an independent fleet arm. Potentially, but also potentially the RAF doesn't, as I said, happens in the 1940s, late 1940s in this timeline. It happens concurrent with the US Army Air Corps. Royal Tank Regiment might be affected as well. I'm not sure about that. As Verdun says, the treaty limits were based on what is the biggest gun in service at this time. Right, Mom. All up to 50k. All the 10 US and fast batteries have been used as ours post World War II. Get Congress approval. 6 knots. Does this affect the development of carriers because of win at Jutland? Potentially not so much, but potentially also differently. It depends. If they stay entirely in-house in the Royal Navy, then considering the carrier development the British were already carrying out with HMS Furious, etc., I wouldn't be surprised if that accelerates an extent in the British pattern. It would be interesting to see how it would affect the carriers differently, but that's a long way down the road. You're talking roughly 15 years to see how that pans out. You're going to have to wait to see if Henderson becomes third Sea Lord. Probably still does in this scenario. And you're going to have to see what he produces. See, Clarke, the R-Class had already been built. That's the trouble. The R-Class were already coming into service at the Battle of Jutland. So, in the nicest way, there's no cancelling the R-Class because you want to go for it. If we consider it, Revenge class-wise, HMS Revenge is in service. HMS Royal Oak is in service. HMS Resolution's fitting out. HMS Royal Sovereign is left behind because crew inexperience. HMS Ramillies is launched in June 1916. The R-Class are coming despite no matter what happens. So the R-Class are coming in. As next was pointing out, the flu pandemic will reach Europe eventually, but it will also be reaching populations which are probably going to be healthier. They're going to have had more food. They're going to be less money. They're going to be in a healthier environment as well. So yeah. If the British break into the Baltic, this would be a very interesting traumatic memory in the German conscious. And would they wonder how they would react leading up to World War II? That's a completely interesting thing to go through, and as I said, that's far too far away to try and work out how that would impact would. McLaren, MC-13, what would the Bismarck, Littorias, and Yamatos look like in this timeline? Existing world of monster ships? Well, the Littorias would probably be built to the Italian interpretation of the treaty, because remember, the Italians were treaty members. So both the French ships, the Dunkirks, etc., and the Richelieus and Littorias would all be built to some version of the treaty limits. I have no idea. The Bismarcks, who knows what they'd be built to. The Germans would have to do a completely different rebuild. And let's be honest, if they build something, if the Bismarck is about the maximum of what they could build when they build it. Bismarck and Tirpitz represent the maximum of what their infrastructure and industry can manage to sustainably build at the point when they build it. So I don't know if they actually have anything different or if they have the same thing. I think they probably have the same thing, and those things don't match up in any way, shape, or form. As for the Yamatos, I have no idea what the Japanese do in this world. But there again, the Japanese in this world, they might be able to build ships because they might find themselves well underneath their treaty limit tonnage-wise and going, yay, we can build it! Look at what the frigating British have! Dan Freeman, please join us in Discord after this video is over to talk about the flu pandemic if you want to, because I will be hosting a Discord live discussion after this in the general chat. And probably this will be going on for about another 10 or so minutes, so I'll probably go to about 10:30. Scott, I think tanks going without much change. The trench war isn't changed, and development complete by now soon. Maybe more money available into war for development and experimental tanks of 19 avoided. Yes, and think about it. If in 1918 is avoided, there's all sorts of interesting things which happen. Take care, Duke of Petrograd. So summary. The big changes that happen with a change in command are communications. It's communication, it's information. And mainly that's due to the staff changes, not just due to the commander changing the commander, because the staff officers involved would be very inveterate communicators, especially James. So whilst we would concentrate on the big name tickets, it's going to be James, the big one. And let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I wonder how such a victory at Jutland would affect cruiser sizes. World with lots of 16.5-inch guns, an 8-inch cruiser might look a little anemic. Probably 9.2-inch. Probably a 9.2, 9.4-inch. I doubt they'd allow cruisers to get 10 or 12 inches, because that would be getting a bit close. If the war ends earlier, would the Italians build the Francisco Caracol class? Potentially. Potentially. Right then. Actually. So, I'm going to say final questions. I'll do about 5 questions, then about past I'm going to go to Discord, okay? So that's about 7 minutes. Before we go, let's talk about what we've got coming up. Next week, it's building fleets at Trafalgar. That's going to be the Tuesday video. And what we've got coming up? Oh, some interesting things. When I put this in and talked about this in a video on Tuesday and put this in, people started answering questions of, If not Pearl Harbor, 7th December. Um, when I'm putting these in the comments, when I'm putting these in videos, the comments to come are quite fun. But it's a case of be very careful of presuming from a title what the subject's going to be. Because, yes, if not Pearl Harbor, it's where else the Japanese might attack and what they might do. But I might go completely different routes. It's going to be an interesting one. It is something I've been toying with for about the last 2 years and playing around with slides on for about the last, I'd say, 14 months. And, yeah. They are fun. It's a fun thing to consider. An interesting thing to consider, because there are other options for them. Including, theoretically, San Francisco. Theoretically. Practically not, but theoretically. I wonder if the French would continue to develop a continuous line of their FT-17 monstrosities if the war ended. Without the proof of concept in battle of the FT-17, war ended. It could be interesting. Their monstrosities could continue. And two, they would have kind of to do an order fleet control of their hands. A 12-inch gun is not credible against an RO and 15 to 16.5-inch guns. That's Blackburn Maximus. Yeah, they would have to build their 15-inch gunships. That's very different. Would NORAD exist even if America was isolationist? If I'm not mistaken, NORAD, when I remember it, stands for North American Aerospace Defense Command. So as long as America has to command its air defense and track its and provide security for itself, yes, NORAD probably still does exist. The fact that it includes Canada, etc., in it is practically because it's sensible. If you're an isolationist America, you might not include NORAD. You might not combine Canada and other things into it, but you probably sort of. Oh, thank you, David Goulding. The fact is, trying to get Canada involved in NORAD is going to depend on how strong Canada's defense is and whether America prefers the idea of intercepting threats over Canada or over America. And the answer is probably they prefer intercepting them over Canada, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do. And also, then that provides you for flying through Canadian territory if you're reinforcing Alaska. So you probably do have some version of NORAD. That's got my coach Beatty upset about the perceived slider being passed over, betrays Brendan's effect to German. This is Beatty's fault. I honestly think Beatty probably ends up retiring to America if he's not had a glorious heroic war. But there again, he could also in Britain be living off Dogger Bank and those other heroes and talk about what might have been if it hadn't been for that fateful car accident because someone slashed all his tyres, cut all his brakes and disconnected his steering wheel. But leaving that to one side, and then whacked him over the head with a shovel. Yeah. Thank you, David Gordon. Thank you. And as said, the link down below to Discord. I will be on there in a couple of minutes because I need to go visit the facilities quickly and check on my mum and sister before I my pop to Discord. Check they're okay. And I might come back with a fluffy research assistant. I probably won't, because usually when I go in at this point, they are curled up and going, no, we're not moving. It's actually getting quite funny. I'll try and get a picture for you all at some point, because what happens is the senior fluffy research assistant curls up on top of a chair in the seat very comfortably. And the fluffy research assistant decides to curl up beneath the chair, in the space between it and the floor. And you have one there, and you have the two heads looking and going, yeah, we're perfectly fine. You're going, you can get in the chair. You can get in the chair as well. You can get to the settee. You can do whatever you like. Why you curl up underneath your brother on the floor? No idea, but that's what I do. Thank you, Innes Morrison. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Debrock. Thank you, Night Security Front. Thank you, Mike Cooch. Thank you, David Goulding. Thank you, Dan Freeman. Thank you, Carl Gasbo. Thank you, Ford Chicago. Thank you, Mark Harkness, Black Maximus. Thank you, Albert Zaski. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Steve Clarke. Thank you, everyone. Leslie. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, everyone who's been watching. There's been so many H's for done. Bill Long, Frank Baumel, IO2. Thank you. Thank you, MC Leisure 13 YouTube. Thank you, Malaga. I don't think I saw you earlier. Say hello. Thank you, Dan Jordan. Thank you, Stephen Richards. Thank you, Dep Squad. Thank you, Duke of Betchington. Frank Bramwell. Thank you. Thank you, all the people who are first-time chatters today. It's really nice to chat to you all. So, Naruto, thank you. Juicy Sushi, yeah, thank you. Sean Mack, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone who was the admins. Thank you to people who are working in the chat and keeping everything nice and polite so that my little cousins can watch and everything was happy and I don't get beaten up by my cousins who will outnumber me. Thank you, everyone. And as said, I'll be on Discord in a couple of minutes to chat away. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.